Underwriting support for this program is provided by the Eureka Teachers Association's School Board Liaison, Philip Middlemiss. Thank you.
Okay, we're reconvening from open session.
When they get the new building,
I mean, from closed session.
the whole building open. Will it still be the side there?
Report out
The main
closed
entrance, or is
session.
it going to be back where the old main entrance was?
On item C1, there is no action to report.
Okay, so we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance, and Susan Johnson will lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, discussion action.
Don't we have to report out from the board for the closing? Oh, she did. I didn't hear. What'd she say? No action.
Nothing to report.
Thank you.
Okay, before we do the discussion action, we have I have a green slip here from Darren Smith about NJROTC.
Well, good evening. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this like really loud? I'm sorry. I've been talking to kids all day. The Navy, I passed an email on to Leanne today and to Rick Jordan. The Secretary of the Navy has approved us to be an NNDCC for next year. So I know at last board meeting, the notion was brought up to extend us to be full-on NNDCC next year. So I've had a couple of students since then missed out on some STEM opportunities, and I would not want any future students to miss out on anything. So I would ask the board tonight to please take us off the cut list. That's my 3 minutes worth. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so fiscal stability planning. Leanne.
It's not working. Okay. Basically, this is a continuation of what we have been doing as a board and as a district, which is to address our structural deficit and look at a plan in order to eliminate that structural deficit. And then at some point, of course, we're going to need to also plan for the triggers. We are in a qualified status with our County Office of Education. This is part of the requirement to take to the county as part of our second interim, which will be coming to the board at the next board meeting. So we've been doing quite a bit of conversation about our fiscal stability plan and options and proposals and things that we've been considering. But what we need the board to do today is, to, at a minimum, make some decisions that will bring that structural deficit or eliminate the structural deficit, which is about $2 million worth of cuts today. And then following that, we can insert that then into the second interim, have the county review it, bring it back to the board, like I said, for the board approval. And then after that, we can continue to work on preparing for any potential cuts due to the ballot initiatives not passing in November. So I think that kind of summarizes what we need to do at tonight's board meeting, recognizing that any kind of cut is extremely painful and hard and never a comfortable place to be. But on the other hand, it is our responsibility to have a budget that is qualified without spending more than we get in, and preferably to have a positive certification. So I think I'm going to ask Paul to roughly take us through what it would look like both if we didn't do anything tonight, with what we need to do and why, and give some updated information with what we have.
Great, thanks, Leanne. I guess I'd echo what Leanne said. Difficult decisions to make. I'll tell you that we obsess over the numbers. We go over them time and time again, and I have two concerns. One is that we are overshooting the mark and that we will unduly cause concern for people. But my deeper concern is that we will undershoot our mark and find out that ultimately we have a larger hole than we can possibly fill on a current year basis. Clearly we want to remain solvent and provide quality education, and hopefully as we put our plan together, that's what we're going to be able to come up with. So I know that continually the question is asked, what is our target? And I'll state pretty bluntly, and I'll go through this. Again, echoing what Leanne had to say, I think that the target that we're looking for tonight is a minimum of $2 million in potential reductions. That will allow us to complete our second interim report and hopefully come in with either a qualified or perhaps even a positive. I'd be happy to stay at qualified, I think, at this point, based on the numbers that we're seeing. But we really do need to get that done, because if we don't get board approval or board direction on these, in essence what we report is the numbers that we have in hand right now, and I feel reasonably certain as we look out over that 3-year multi-year projection that 13-14 would not look very good for us and would probably result in a negative certification, either self-certifying or from the county's perspective. So here's what we look like right now. The projected deficit for 2011-12 is roughly $1.9 million. We started earlier in the year with about $2.5 million. We've been able to do some work both at the sites and in the business services office, looking through the budgets, making sure that all the line items are where they need to be. If there are over budgeted items, that we bring those back down to a more appropriate number. So that brings us to where we are at this point with a projected $1.9 million deficit. I will say that those numbers always are changing, but that's what they look like at this point. As we look at some of the adjustments for 2012-13, and I'll call it on the natural, our 2011-12 projected deficit moves to about a $2.5 million deficit for 12-13, and that's for two pretty straightforward reasons. The first is our step and column increase. That's the increase in salary and benefits. Just as people roll into the next step in their salary columns. That's the roughly $235,000. I'm rounding things to keep the zeros out there to make it easier to track. The other key component that happens on the natural is the revenue limit. That revenue decreases because we have declining enrollment, and that's projected to be about a $365,000 decrease just because of the declining enrollment aspect of how the revenue limit is calculated. That brings us then to a $2.5 million projected deficit on a pre-trigger basis for 2012-13. And I say a pre-trigger basis because the next thing that we have to face, the plan that we'll need to put together both for ourselves to show our fiscal stability and to be able to convince the county that we do have that plan in place going forward. We have been bidden basically to include the potential trigger reductions that would happen if the initiatives that are supposed to be on the November ballot don't go through. It comes in two aspects. One is a revenue limit decrease of $1,325,000. The other is the transportation funding decrease for next year of $375,000, totaling trigger reductions, potential trigger reductions of $1.7 million. That, along with the normal deficit, if you will, that we project, puts us to $4.2 million as our overall target for 2012-13. As we go through tonight, we're going to propose to go at this really in two segments, a Plan A and a Plan B, if you will. And the first part of it is, let's do what we can to, if not completely eliminate, at least significantly close the projected deficit for 12-13, the pre-trigger, the $2.5 million. In addition to that, we'll have to do additional work to try to come up with other ways to reduce or reduce expense or increase revenues so that we can get closer to that $4.2 million and show that we're able to get through not just the rest of this year, but the next 2 years of the multi-year projection as well. And to make things even rosier, in about 45 days, we're going to start working on our 2012-13 budget. So this 2013-14 that right now is our second-year multi-projection, all of a sudden becomes our next year. So it's one thing to think that, all right, that's 2 years out. We have plenty of time to take whatever action is appropriate to try to tame that deficit, but it's right around the corner. So that means that all of a sudden we'll be looking at 2014-15 as our third year out, and we really haven't turned much attention to that at this point. So,
I'm
yeah.
confused because I thought she said that we needed to do 2 million in cuts tonight for the second interim.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling us we need to cut 4,200,000.
No. No. So really what I ultimately, Fran, we have a really large number out there, which is 4.2 million, but 1.7 of that is predicated on the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So really what we want to do is look at the things that, first of all, are within our control and try to chop into that $2.5 million deficit. That's step one, and
Yes,
we're not able to accomplish all of it tonight. I certainly don't think so in any case, but we will need to address that in future meetings as part of our fiscal stability plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Earlier today, I met with you, and you helped me a great deal, and I'd like the public to understand this, because there's a lot of talk about our ending fund balance and how big they are, and we're rosy, and we have all this money. And you put it very succinctly in a couple of lines about deferrals. Could you explain that just briefly, what that actually means?
Should have written it down, obviously, but one of the real difficult situations that we face is what we show on the books, our ending fund balances, call it our reserves, whatever, the money that's there for us to be able to dip into, does not reflect the actual cash on hand. So we carry roughly a $6 million deferral of cash that is not yet in pocket. So at any given time, you can probably look at our ending fund balance and, at least at this point in time, subtract the $6.5 million and say that's our real cash. So to put differently, if we show an ending fund balance of $8.5 million, it means that we probably really have $2 million in cash behind that.
In private sector lingo, that deferral would be accounts receivable.
Correct. And that's exactly what it is. As the state defers that money, we book a receivable, in essence, that the state does not pay. 38 cents on every dollar is not being paid in the same accounting period, the same fiscal year as the revenue that's booked. So
That's exactly it. Thank you.
So let me try to go about that a little bit different way too. Oh Lord. Here is kind of, as Leanne was referring to, both a before and after look, if you will.
Well, excuse me, could I just, is there any are there copies of this?
Oh.
Some of us are auditory learners and some of us aren't, so it would be
All I
helpful
have
to
is this.
have.
I just have this.
And I'm glad to go run it off.
Debbie, is that
if we
these?
could.
What I have are these. It's not that.
No, she's talking about what's on the screen.
Oh, on the screen. I'm sorry, I didn't make copies of what's on the screen right now. I don't have that in copy form.
And board members would like copies
Yes,
of this.
definitely.
Sorry.
we would.
I got ahead of myself. I apologize.
You want me to, if you could print them, I can go run them off.
I
You're
Okay,
right.
thanks, Paul.
Can
print
we,
from here.
can we
Oh,
print
yeah,
this?
yeah. I'm sorry. There's a copy. Sorry.
Do we need this printed too? No. Thank you.
Sorry, Georgianne. I'll go ahead and move forward in the meantime. What this chart shows, and I understand that it's difficult to see from where we're sitting, but the top box, if you will, says this is our current scenario. This is what we look like over the 3-year, multi-year period. So as we look at the box here for no.
Marcel.
It doesn't even give me a restart later option.
It won't let me. Okay, I've got 14 minutes, so here we go. Yes. So the current scenario is the 2011-12 second interim, and basically what it says is we have about $8.8 million worth of general fund ending balance, unrestricted dollars, 7.3, along with our special reserve fund gives us $8.8 million that we are projecting that we will show as our ending fund balances for 2011-12, juxtaposed to our projected cash at the end of 2011-12 of $2.7 million. So there's the gap that you were speaking of, Hank. It's a little bit less than I surmised, but it's about $6.1 million difference between our balances compared to what our projected cash is. Okay. If we take that across, we see the same, basically the same dynamics for 2012-13. I'm going to call them loosely reserves. Our general fund, unrestricted ending fund balance, plus our fund 17 gives us a roughly $4.6 million there. So we've dropped by $4 million from year to year without making any reductions that we're going to talk about tonight, but it does include the trigger reductions. So those numbers are in there. We're budgeting as we were told, both from our consultants and from the county office. As we move to 13-14, that number drops to $586,000 for general fund, unrestricted ending fund balance, plus fund 17. And you can see down below what our projected cash looks like. We're running at that point, at the end of 13-14, a negative cash projection of over $4 million. We can't survive like that.
So in this chart, the difference between 11-12 and 12-13 is the $4.2 million deficit, which included the trigger.
Say it again, I'm sorry, John.
The difference between the 11-12 column and the 12-13 column
Correct.
It's
includes a deficit of $4.2 million, assuming that the trigger has taken place.
That's correct.
right. So
That's
it's
correct.
basically saying we choose to do nothing tonight, and the ballots don't pass. This is what it would look like.
And thank you for that, because I can say the same thing about what happens from 12-13 to 13-14. That deficit in with the trigger, continuing forward with the trigger is roughly $4.1 million, as opposed to 4.2. We do pick up a little bit. We have some things that drop off in 13-14 that allow us to look a little bit better on the natural, even though our step and column increases. The second box, the box down below, then inserts a $2 million budget reduction, using that as kind of my placeholder. So you'll see that the 11-12 from box to box stays the same, but when we move to the projected column for 12-13, all of a sudden that $4.6 million of unrestricted ending fund balance in Fund 17 jumps up by the $2 million. No longer 4.6, we're at 6.6, and our cash position at that point is 1.8 million, as opposed to the negative 165 or so that we saw in the unreduction scenario. For 13-14, similar dynamic. Our ending fund balance plus Fund 17, roughly 4.5 million in reserves there. Our projected cash in that scenario also shows a negative of about $317,000, but at least in where we are today, we have the Fund $40 of roughly 1.9 million, the capital outlay fund, that we could borrow on an interfund basis to make sure that overall we stayed in a positive cash position through 2013-14. This doesn't completely eliminate either what I'll call the Plan A deficit, the 2.5, and it certainly doesn't address overall the 1.7. But what it does do is it allows us to keep sufficient reserves through the end of our second multi-year, 2013-14, such that we can present a plan that will pass muster, I believe, with the county office, and also gives us the opportunity to see what happens with the November elections and to see if, in fact, the trigger is pulled or if the budget initiatives pass. If there's good news there, then some of the work that we'll do tonight, it won't have gone for naught, because we still have that 2.5 structural deficit that we're talking about, but it certainly gives us much more time looking forward to make other changes, to expect the economy to turn around. I believe that time is our ally in that particular situation. So that's what that looks like. Any questions on those charts?
Is there any
Is there any possibility that any of the things that we eliminate tonight, if things look rosier and the trigger doesn't go through and so forth and so on, that can we put them back once we've eliminated them?
Certainly, for a couple of reasons. One is just from a process perspective, if you will, which is we're going to talk about things, but we're going to continue to work on our plan. So really what I'm hoping tonight is that we get the direction that says we have the numbers, we have the board's approval and sign off to be able to submit a report to the county for second interim that shows us in a pretty decent situation. But as we continue to do our work, we may look at any particular option that we talk about tonight and say, wow, that didn't really provide the savings that we expected. It doesn't, the program that it was impacting, we have a different thought on how we want to go about that. It's a long way of saying we still have flexibility to make those changes going forward. The other part of it is on a practical basis, this will buy us some additional time. And although I don't want us to start backsliding to the point where we see that deficit start to grow again, we may see that there's a particular program or situation that just is so very important and such a high priority that we make that decision.
Thank you.
Also to point out, that's pre-trigger.
Yeah, that's what didn't I say pre-trigger?
Yeah.
Trigger.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to restart the computer. So.
Can you give me a number? I mean,
Maybe I'm not.
I'm looking at the budget that we adopted. And it covers, this is a 3-year budget. We adopted it in what, June of last year? Yeah, it would have been in June of last year. And two things have happened. Now, step and column is in this budget. Step and column has been accounted for in the budget that we adopted in June, correct?
Yes.
It's a known number. It doesn't, I mean, it's what it is. It's
So the budget we adopted obviously was for 11-12, but yes, there was a step and column from 2010.
well, no,
up to
when we adopt our
2011-12.
budget, we have to adopt it for 3 years out.
Oh, so you're
this
talking
covers
the
11,
multi-years.
12, 12,
Okay.
13, 13, 14 in the budget that we adopted. And then we have the interims that tell us how we're doing
Kind of updated.
according to this this budget that we adopted. So two things have actually happened since we adopted this budget. We had a reduction in busing or in transportation costs, which, what number is that? That's what I'm looking for. The two things that have
You
happened.
mean a reduction in the money we get for transportation?
Correct. What actual tangible things have happened since we adopted this budget in June? We have experienced mid-year cuts.
Correct.
What are the numbers on those? We didn't receive a cut in transportation. That's going to happen next year.
So actually, in the numbers here for 11-12 is about a $183,000 reduction in transportation. That had already been booked.
In transportation funding.
In transportation funding, sorry, thank you. And Wendy, we didn't have time, we'd gone past the point where we could make that change and put that money back in. So what's going to happen ultimately is the $183,000 will come back to us, $153,000 will go away in terms of revenue limits. So the net of all that is that we'll actually gain about $30,000 from the 11-12 scenario that we're looking at right now.
Okay. And what was the other cut that we experienced mid-year after this budget was adopted?
So,
ADA.
well,
We actually haven't. We're looking at 12, 13 numbers.
at 12, 13, yeah, other than having the trigger that's in there that we're looking at for the second interim, there's no major changes beyond that point. Maybe I'm not following your question, Wendy.
Well, I'm still having a hard time understanding how we get from this adopted budget that has specific set numbers and how we're talking about cutting $4 million out of our budget for something that, I mean, obviously we have to be prepared for that. But this budget that we adopted has an ongoing continuing structural deficit that reduces our what is commonly termed as ending fund balances, down from 8.82 or 8.862%, we lose $3 million in year one. This is just structural deficits, and it's included in our budget. We adopted this budget with these structural deficits here. It has $1.8 million lost in year two, which brings our reserves down to 7.4%. And in year three, it has another $1.5 million in deficit spending that brings our budgeted reserve down to the 3% that's required by law. And the County Office of Ed approved this budget.
Right.
I would say to one
So-
degree, or one of the factors that have put some pressure on what we approved in June was some additional costs that we hadn't anticipated. We've talked before, for example, of special education costs going up. That would not have been reflected in the June budget. So as that trickles through or matriculates through, it's going to have an impact on our budget. And that was, I remember, $750,000 or maybe almost close to $1 million of additional costs that was not in the budget that we had approved in June.
Wasn't the amount of the deferrals also increased?
Yeah, there were
Yes,
additional
that's
deferrals that
right.
occurred in the early part of 11-12 as well. So, and Wendy, maybe
But-
the better answer for all that from my perspective is we can give you a reconciliation that shows here's where we were at budget adoption, here's where we are now at second interim, and it carries on through the multi-years. But so Leanne's already cited one. But again, as we're looking at the multi-years for the second interim budget, those do have the trigger reductions in there. So that's a big difference between what we saw at the adopted budget multi-years.
Remember, the 4.2 includes 1.7 of a
Trigger.
possible trigger.
Right.
But the 1.7 that was up there to begin with was citing step and column and declining enrollment. That's in this budget. Step and column and declining enrollment has been accounted for 3 years out in our adopted
Yes.
budget.
It has.
So that's what I'm asking. What has changed that represents 1 point? I understand part of it is the trigger reductions that we have to account for. If that's going to happen, then we have to deal with that. But what makes up that 1.7? Because it's not in this budget, because this budget accounts for step and column and declining enrollment.
The 1.7 is the trigger. The step and columns are
Put the other,
235 and 365.
You should have it in front of you now.
thank you.
They gave us.
It's up here are the step and columns. And the trigger is down here.
Okay, then my numbers are wrong. Then what, okay, 1.9, not 1.7, 1.9 is, they're saying 1.9 has to be, okay,
These are step and columns for 12, 13.
that's in this budget. And so is,
It is.
and so is declining enrollment, is projected in this budget.
That's right.
So why are we now needing to cut $1.9 million from a budget that we adopted 3 years ago that accounted for $1.9 million of step and column and declining enrollment? And I understand if there's other numbers, I need to know what they are. If other things represent this $1.9 million,
Right.
the thing that you just cited, this is a difference, this is a change.
Right.
It's not step and column and it's not declining enrollment.
So the 1.9 million
Why
for
am I pointing
2011-12 is what we're looking at for this year, right? And Wendy, I don't have, unfortunately, the budget in front of me, so I don't know what it said that our projected deficit was for 11-12.
This is not going from a balanced budget to a 1.9. This is going from whatever that deficit was to a 1.9. So it's not a 1.9 change.
Say that again? I'm trying to follow what
It's
you're
not a
saying. That
one-
didn't make sense to me.
It's not a 1.9 increase in the deficit. There's already a deficit in here.
That's right.
It's not a balanced budget.
Correct.
So the increase is whatever that deficit is showing to a 1.9. You were rattling off some numbers. What
I'm
was the
sorry.
deficit?
The deficit projected for 11-12 was $3 million.
So here it is 1.9. So it's been reduced.
No, they're saying that we need to cut $1.9 million worth of programs or people or something from our budget that isn't included in this. It's in addition to this, because this figures in that and it comes out of our ending fund balance.
That's a $3 million deficit. The situation hasn't, cuts weren't made to address that deficit. It wasn't balanced, but there have been improvements made to it. So now the deficit has been reduced from 3 to 1.9. This is an improvement. It's not worse.
Except that this shows that we are accounting for, that we are spending $3 million more than we're bringing in, and they're taking it out of, right here, it comes out of our reserves. These ending fund balances that all along people have been saying, look at all this money. And I'm not saying that I need to understand this because I think other people need to understand this. I don't understand it. If we are running a structural deficit and have been, and we show it up here, and then we say, yep, and that's going to reduce our ending fund balance by X amount, and we no longer have an 8.62% reserve, we have a 7.42% reserve. It's accounting for this structural deficit.
And I would say to some degree, there's been, again, additional pressures. One is in July, there were new deferrals that we hadn't accounted for in those, so that our cash position has changed
And
from that, from when we adopted that budget, as well as some of the increased burden onto the budget like we've talked about. I think, yes, we could operate with a structural deficit, but I think ultimately we're not going to have any reserves, and then we're going to dip into less than the reserve. And we've been, to some degree, utilizing, adult ed funds and some other things that to keep us afloat, for lack of a better word. And we're looking at developing a plan where we can be fiscally sound without having to look at some of those types of support.
I understand that, and I understand that this is not the way it should be. But I need to point out, and I need to make it clear, that we adopted this budget understanding that we are dipping into our reserves in a big way, and in year 3, it leaves us, and those things, if I see them on the board and I think, okay, what has changed since we adopted this budget? And then I hear, oh, we didn't account for step and column or declining enrollment. It's like, no, that's not the case. And maybe we're just terming it wrong, but I need that clarified, that that isn't what is causing us to have to look at cutting $1.something million out of our budget, because that is in this budget. It is reflected in this number,
Okay, so
and we have it in this ending fund balance. I'm not saying.
If I'm understanding your question right, you're saying why was a $3 million deficit okay 9 months ago, and now a 2.5 is not okay now?
No, that's not what she's saying.
I'm saying the confusion as to why we seem to have so much money and why these numbers don't make sense is it's reflected in this, and now we're talking about a number that is being called something that it isn't, that is accounted for in this budget, and it reduces and our cash flow situation is what is really serious about this particular budget.
Yes.
Because by the time we have dipped into whatever reserves we have left and we bring it down in year 3, it shows that we're bringing it down to the bare minimum, leaving us an ending fund balance of $986,000, which doesn't pay 1 month's payroll.
Correct.
We won't have the money to make payroll.
Right.
It's not a matter of that it's owed to us because it's deferred and we don't actually have it in our bank account.
Right.
And I understand why this budget was a problem. I mean, I didn't understand this enough. I still don't understand this enough. I could spend a lifetime and still not understand this enough. But if I'm going to be cutting programs, I mean, I thought we were done. I don't like this part of my job. But then I need to know what this actually represents that has changed since we adopted, as a board, this budget. What is it? Where did we go over from this budget? Step and column is in here, accounted for.
Right.
So what is that $1.9 million?
So what is our projected deficit of 1.9 million this year? Is that the question?
What is it specifically? What's in it?
Well, I mean, everything is. I don't quite know how to answer that. I mean, so this is not a flip answer, but the 1.9 deficit says that we're spending $1.9 million more than we're bringing in right now.
See,
And I don't have the budget in front of me, and even coming up and talking about structural deficit is difficult because it's not just a couple items that are on the page. You have things like the ARA funds that drop off, the Ed Jobs funds. We had carryover from Title I. So there's lots of things that are kind of moving parts that you don't necessarily see in that number. We can certainly pull that number apart and say from adopted budget to this point in time, and then taking out to the multi-years, here are the things that have changed, and you can see those changes through those various points in time. But what I believe is, from what we're looking there, that we actually are looking better with a projected deficit of 1.9 million than we were when that budget was adopted. And to me, it does beg the question, if that's the case, then why are things looking so very different right now? And a large part of that is, in fact, the trigger reductions. So we have 1.7 in one year, which eats away at ending fund balance. We have another 1.7 in the following year. Right there is $3.5 million that gets dropped off the bottom line that wasn't contemplated at budget adoption.
But you're telling us that the 2 million that we're looking at cutting tonight is not taking into account the trigger.
So if we start from where we are at this point in time with a projected $1.9 million deficit, again,
Which is better than the adopted budget.
Which is better than the adopted budget. The things that are going to cause us to have a $2.5 million deficit for next year, the two that are really easy and are known and that are right in front of us, are step and column and the revenue limit decrease based on the declining enrollment. So those two factors right there, to the tune of about $600,000, say that if everything else stayed the same, we're looking at a $1.9 million hole right now, and we would be looking at a $2.5 million hole next year. It's just trying to bridge the gap from how we got from where we are this year to where we're projecting for next year before we add the trigger on top of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think some of Wendy's question is that didn't we already account for step and column?
Right.
Didn't we already
all
account
three
for
of
the declining
those
enrollment?
years.
And so that chunk of it, isn't it already put in there?
And like we're double counting.
And are we counting it again,
Yes.
or is it?
No. So it was in the multi-year budget. The 12-13 projection would have already had step and column, and presumably the declining
It did.
enrollment
Yeah, it
impact on
did.
revenue limit as well. So, you know what I'm saying, at this point in time, we're at 1.9. We know these two things in particular push us on the natural to a $2.5 million deficit next year.
Right.
On top of that, we have the trigger that puts us at $4.2 million. And what we're proposing is to come up with a plan to either reduce expense or increase revenues to the point that we can take out a good $2 million portion of that 2.5.
So maybe another way to look at it, and I'm like Wendy, I could be doing this for 100 years and still probably not totally understand it. What we're really looking at is, Wendy, you have what, about a 3.1 deficit in that budget right now?
Mm-hmm.
And we're saying that it's really more now like 2.5.
Which likely...
Which would then would not be double counting step and column. What's it saying is we have made some good corrections and we've made some improvement in our budget, but we still need to continue to make reductions to work on eliminating the deficit altogether. So we've come from 3.1 down to 2.5 in 12-13.
Yes.
So that way it's not counting step and column again twice. It's just reminding us that that's in there.
Forgive me for, doing my learning curve out here in public where everybody can watch my ignorance.
No, it's
No, because
That's what we're
everybody
supposed
has
to
the
do.
same questions.
When you adopt a budget, you're required to follow this budget. These interim reports show how well we're following this budget.
Mm-hmm.
So Is that not correct?
I would say the interim
Where we are
report
in-
shows us what changes have occurred that we need to consider in our budget. They could be for the positive if we got some windfall somewhere, or they could be to the negative.
And in fact, they are updating your budget at that point, saying things have changed since budget adoption, and each of the interims reflects and memorializes those changes.
And so this is our first interim
Okay?
that I'm looking at. Here's our original budget, and it shows a deficit 11-12 this school year of $3 million that we knew about, we expected, and we're expecting to spend $3,124 more than we make in this school year. At our first interim, which is an update on this budget and where we're at in it, it showed that we now are showing a deficit for that same time period of $4,492,145. So, in my mind, the numbers sort of made sense if I took our adopted budget numbers, added this 1.9 million, comes to a little closer than where we are, and that almost made sense. Now we have to cut because we can stand this $3 million deficit because it's figured into our budget. It's not a pretty thing and it should be changed. But when I tried to reconcile this number that we want to cut in programs and people and services, I couldn't find that. And it's late, that's where my problem is. If this number in our first interim changes from the 3 million to 4 point, I wish I had my glasses, 4.5 million more, but it's not in the stepping column, so it's like, where are we spending more than we said we would spend in our budget? So I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I know there's probably stuff that I don't understand, but
I mean, I do know one, and I don't mean to pick on special ed, but it was one of the most significant increases that came in that we didn't anticipate, including additional chargebacks from the county, which we don't even have any control over. And the number 750,000 is what accounts for at least some of the difference between what we thought would be the deficit to then what now is the deficit.
Wendy, I'm completely at a loss as to why you're adding that $3 million deficit to this 1.9. This is for the same year.
because we've budgeted and adopted for a deficit, a structural deficit in our budget. It's not pretty, and I don't think that's the best way to do business, but it is budgeted for, and so is step and column. So I need to understand why, at this point, I have to cut programs and people and things to add to another 1.9 million. I don't understand that.
So your question then is, if $3 million deficit was okay 9 months ago, why is a $1.9 million deficit not okay today?
In a nutshell.
And I would say, I mean, one of the things that we're using to help us be able to be comfortable with the $3 million budget is adult ed funds. In particular, the funds that the board has since restricted or reserved for the Lincoln remodel. So to me, if you look at those 3 years out, that money kind of went away to help us get through those 3 years. So now that we've set that money aside, that alone, we have to then make some reductions for, because we no longer have it to bail us out if we needed it.
Another point is, you were saying that the deferrals are now 38% of the budget.
Correct.
What were the deferrals last June?
I don't know offhand, John.
But it was a smaller number.
It was a smaller number. They've increased from year to year, so that, the deferral amount has.
By a fairly large amount.
Yeah. I was going to guess at the number, but I won't, but it's a significant increase, yes.
Okay.
And the deferrals are what they owe us but are not paying us.
Right.
That's correct.
Like we've might get 6 months from now, or maybe next year, or the year after, or whenever they decide.
Because
Or never get
Or
it
maybe
at
never
all.
one of the tricks that the governor did was not cut our budget as much, but he delayed the payment that was due us. He increased the delay and the amount of the delay that was due us. So when we're looking at cash flow, we have to take that into an account. So where do we go from here? Are you not ready to make any cuts tonight, or?
Well, and I would say even, given that what we did in June, the plan was to make further cuts. It just hadn't been articulated what those cuts were. And now we're, 6 or 7 months from June that we now have to say, these are where some of those cuts are going to be. I don't think anybody would have ever wanted to say it's okay to continue to operate spending $3 or $4 million more than what we bring in. What I felt it was saying is that we are going to have a plan. This is part of that plan on how we're going to address that deficit. I don't think the intent was for us to ever say having a deficit was okay.
I think what we need to do is look forward. Take a look at where we are today and where we're going to be, which is what the presentation that Paul's spent some time on, to see that the cuts that we're proposing tonight are necessary. And we can go back later to address your confusion about the past budgets, but we need to go from this point forward so we can get something done here.
Right.
But it's not the past budget, it's the current budget that she's
Right.
talking about. And I feel kind of the same way she does. I don't really understand it either, how it, I spent time with Paul today, and I did a couple weeks ago trying to get my head around this too, and how it can look the way that it does on paper, and I understand the part that you were talking about, the cash part of it. But just in like a completely simplistic term, as a person with the way that I kind of looked at it is, and maybe this is totally off, but if you have a reserve, I would think that you have to have a certain amount in that reserve. But kind of what your reserve would be is if you're, for this month, you're going to be deferred, you're not going to get this money till out here. But so you're running below here, you might take some out of that reserve to cover that, and then when you get the money that you're supposed to get, because when it comes, it's not that we're not getting the money, it's just coming later, you put it back into that account that you paid your bills with. Kind of like, just like your checking gets low, you pull your sum out of your savings, and then when you get that money you're supposed to get, it goes into back into your savings. I mean, it's because deferrals. So I think the question I asked you today, which you answered, was that because what I was trying to understand is if it was perfect and everything was right and we weren't being deferred and we're getting the money when we're supposed to get it, are we still spending more than we are getting? It's not that we're just not making it because they're deferred. Even if they were on time, are we spending more than we're getting?
Yes. Yes.
Which is what this sheet is all about. Current year,
Right.
ignoring the deferrals, we have a $1.9 million deficit. Next year, it'll be 2.5 unless the triggers hit, in which case it'll be $4.2 million deficit. And then the following year would be 4.2 plus whatever.
Right.
So if you just look from this point forward, you would see that it's absolutely necessary that we have to come up with some cuts, a lot of cuts. And the $2 million mentioned is probably, I think it's probably enough if the triggers don't hit.
So what is the balances, our fund balance sheet, with the balances in the fund, what is the percentage of that that is actually cash in the bank. We have a budget, and then we have a bank account.
Right.
So where's our money? Where's our bank account? And what do we actually have in cash in comparison to what we're showing on our balance sheet?
So take a look at the second sheet then. Hold on for everybody.
That's the number that you were saying is about 6 million different.
Right. So for this year, projected second interim, and this is not all of our fund balances, but it is the majority of them and the majority that we're able to use and tap into. So that is the general fund ending balance, the unrestricted portion of that. Roughly $7.3 million is what we're projecting for year end right now, along with the 1.4 that is our special reserve, our savings account that's set aside, if you will. Those two amounts together are $8.8 million. That's what everything goes according to plan. That's what our books will show at the end of 2011-12. That being said, our projected cash relative to that 8.8 million is 2.7 million. So there's a 6.1 million gap in there. And part of that is that I haven't expressed everything that's in any fund balance. There is a restricted portion that's in the general fund that would increase this $8.8 million. And it's probably $300,000, somewhere in that range. So off the cuff, I say that there's about a $6.4 million deferral that we would be looking at year end, in fact.
But the short answer to your question is, if you look at the projected cash line, those are the numbers that you were asking about.
Right.
At the end of this June, there'd be 2.7 in the bank. The following June 30th, we would be overdrawn by 164,000, and then the following year, which is 14 months from now, 15 months from now, we would be overdrawn by $4.3 million if we don't do something. And so we need to come up with these cuts tonight so we can get the budget submitted to the county.
And so I guess, I don't know if I'll be simplistic or not, so looking at the 8.8 million, that's not money we can use out of that. We really can only use about 2.7 million in terms of paying bills.
That's right.
So that's the difference, even though it's on the books. In essence, that isn't money we can use because it doesn't yet exist in our bank account. It only exists sort of on paper.
Patrick
And
has a question?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What I'm hearing you say is that you're never going to get that money?
No,
we
that's not what
we
we're
don't know
saying.
the answer to that.
That's money that's been allocated by the state, it's part of the state's adopted budget, right? It's like, it's an account receivable?
The deferral amount, correct, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So you're going to get that money?
At some point.
That money
we
is
hope.
going to come in?
We hope, yeah.
Yeah. So
Do we
that
have-
money will at some point in time be available to pay bills?
At some point,
So,
right.
But-
and it's money.
But some
But
point
it
could
keeps on
be
happening.
3 years
The
from
money
now.
you're supposed to receive
Yeah, we've
now
had
keeps
deferrals
on getting
that have been
deferred, so you
years.
continue to chase that number.
Right.
Is the problem. It never stops, or at least in this scenario, there's not a point at which they quit deferring, so you continue to amass your cash to the point that you have no deferral. That deferral, in essence, is ongoing until the state changes the way that they handle their deferrals or their repayments.
But they continue to pay you on a regular basis, even if some of that money is deferred, right?
Sure.
The current accounts receivable does come in to be replaced by new accounts receivable. So,
Right.
so
Right. It's just like billing in any business.
Right.
The money is not always paid in cash. People charge things. It takes time for the cash to
Sure.
come in. It's not like.
Is there a set schedule for these deferrals?
Which
Like,
is what I
Yes.
There is.
do we know when we actually get that money?
Yes.
And is it within the fiscal year?
Some of
Some
it
of
is,
them
some of
and
it
some of them
isn't.
not.
So again, for every dollar that we're supposed to receive from the state, 62 cents of it comes in within the same year. And although they keep on pushing that out, it might have been a month that they were promising, and now it's 3 months, but still it would happen within the same year. But 38 cents of that dollar gets pushed out, at least in terms of where we are, to 12/13.
And so then it's paid in 2012-13 to be replaced by another 38 cents or
38 cents.
whatever of the
Right.
12-13 income that will be paid in 13-14.
Correct.
Until the economy recovers and the state ever gets our accounts receivable paid off.
Right. And really, the only reason that we see our cash balance or our deferral decreasing is because less is going to be deferred because we're earning less because of declining enrollment. So our overall revenue limit number continues to drop as our enrollment declines, which means in turn that our cash deferral decreases. But that's not a good thing necessarily.
No.
May I respectfully request that we move forward item by item and say yes or no to some of these things so that you have some direction
Thank you.
as far as the end of the evening. I am not in favor of any of these cuts, but in order to submit a second interim with a stabilization plan, we have to move forward.
And I would agree to that rationale, that line of thinking, making the statement that as the only way my brain can understand these numbers is the difference between our adopted budget, our interim report that shows the differences from our adopted budget, and the balance, the change, what I see as the net change in our deficit spending, our structural deficit that we've been carrying for a long time. I am concerned about this, our ending fund balance in these 3 years going down to a number that won't even cover 1 month's payroll. Now, the state may say that we only need a 3% reserve, but I see that that's a very foolish situation to find ourselves in because you can't pay people. You know, we don't get to write, what are those called? that the state
Vouchers
writes.
or whatever.
Okay.
But the numbers that I'm looking at, and that's why I asked for specific clarification of what that number represents, I would only be willing to entertain, and it's just because I can't do it any other way, cuts that represent the number that I see as the difference between what our budget says we can spend and what we actually spent, which is more close to $140,000.
It's about
$4 million, $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Which is what we were saying at the beginning, that we're looking for somewhere approaching $2 million in cuts, that we would be addressing
I'm just saying.
other possible cuts if the trigger occurs later, but not tonight. So we're looking at somewhere close to $2 million in cuts tonight.
That's different from
And I'm comfortable with $1.5 million in cuts tonight, unless somebody has a,
Okay, so item number 1, child development. This number you have here tonight is 51,000, which is significantly higher than what you gave to us a couple of weeks ago. So could you explain how that number was arrived at?
Okay, so I'll just say that in general, on this chart, everything that's in the far right-hand column is kind of the net impact to general fund. So the net impact that we had originally projected for child development was, or at least in this iteration, $52,000. So right now, the encroachment, the money that we are contributing over and above the amount of revenue that the program brings in is $68,000. There's also a carryover that they had from the previous year. So that means that in essence, we're spending $82,000 more than they had in revenue. We have an indirect, which is basically an administrative overhead cost that comes back. So the net of all those three, and therefore the bottom line impact on the general fund, is about $52,000. With that being said, in the meantime, we've been able to work with Debbie Brocco-Springer on this and have a couple ideas, one to increase revenue, actually a couple to increase revenue, and one to decrease expense.
So
But
just
they're not in on here yet.
They're
They're in the middle.
They're in the notes section. So
just-
what we're, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just roughly, how did you come up with increasing revenues and
So the large number there, the 25,000, one of the rooms that the Winsler Center uses is only in operation 3 days out of the week, so 2 days is being used for other reasons. We were able to calculate what that lost ADA is for those 2 days per week and annualize that, and that's about a $25,000 increase in revenue just by being able to utilize that facility or that room on a full-time basis.
by having more Winsler students, you're saying?
Right.
That's right.
And so then, more students, and then how would we decrease expenses by the 37,000?
A couple ways. One is we have a retirement there, so replacing that person will provide some revenue reduction. The other thing is, as we went through and looked at the budgets and said, how closely are we tracking our actuals to budgets? They were carrying a fairly large placeholder, if you will, other operating expense, Object 5888, and when expenses are not yet assigned, we don't know if we're going to spend that on materials and supplies, we don't know if we're going to spend that on personnel. It's kind of a place to hold it until we decide how to utilize those monies. As Debbie and I went through her budget and looked at that particular line, we were able to determine, hey, we don't really need to recognize that expense. That can come back into the general fund, so reducing the amount that we contribute there.
If we're going to add a classroom, another classroom of kids there, then how would we at the same time decrease expenses to that large of amount?
So
How could
again,
we have both at the same time?
Debbie, do you want to, maybe you can speak to the overall expense reductions that are there, but one of them is we had a budget line for expenses that we determined we don't need to have those expenses. So we basically made a budget change there and said that number we're going to take right out of your budget.
And wasn't it primarily in materials and supplies, or, I can't remember what,
Materials and supplies, and then it was also a carryover from the year before.
right.
And then the classroom we had to share this year for lack of space in the district with the preschool speech program. So that limited us, instead of 5 days a week providing care, we went to doing 3 days. So we calculated with the lost ADAs then by having to share the classroom. And then the retirement, one teacher who's retiring this year. And we're going to go in and restructure the program using existing staff.
So this doesn't seem like anyone would object to this change in the budget.
Okay, so actually what we're adding
Net savings.
is, the savings is 51,674? Okay.
No, savings of 12,000.
So truly, we will generate additional revenue over expense of $12,000. So going from a $52,000 negative, we're going to pull back $63,000 of it and actually generate a positive number out of the operation.
Something around 12,000.
Something around $12,000, right.
And save 12,000.
We're going
Do you feel like you'll be able to get enough kids to fill 2 classrooms?
Well, we always have 2 classrooms filled. It's
Just-
the third classroom, the one we're doing preschool speech and then the.
So you'll be filling a 3rd classroom now?
Well, we already, yes.
Yes, for 5 full days instead of 1 for 3.
Exactly.
And you have the kids out there that, good.
And perhaps another way to look at that is even if those revenues weren't to materialize, we have expense reductions of roughly $40,000, which would take that $52,000 negative down to about a $12,000 or $15,000 negative. So it would at least put it in the range of a break even. The revenue would put us over the top.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Okay, so we're all on board for that.
Yep.
Item 2, CalSafe.
I thought CalSafe was a grant.
It used to be.
It used to be, but now it's part of the flexibility that we can sweep into the general fund. In addition, there was an encroachment above and beyond what we received from the grant anyway.
So this is eliminating the program. And you said there were 5 EHS students and 7 ZO students. And wouldn't we lose those students if
Well,
they
I
didn't
said
have
it-
this program?
And I would say at some point during the year, there was that many kids. There are currently only 4. Because I kind of come and go based on, there's, of course, situation and yeah, as well as graduating. You know, I don't know that that's necessarily a yes or no question. I do know that the other high schools that have eliminated their program have not necessarily reported back a decline in enrollment as a result. Usually then what it means is that they would look at more of an independent study option versus, at least for a period of time, versus attending a more comprehensive program.
I think in general, when we're talking about something that used to be grant funded and isn't, and is costing us $72,700 to service somewhere between 4 and 8 students, and we do have options and we do have alternatives, I would vote to eliminate the program.
I would be a yes.
Me too.
That's 5 yeses.
Yep.
Item 3, half-day kindergarten.
This one's a little bit more difficult to quantify. Really, the concept behind this is that if we need to add additional facilities, i.e. a modular there at Alice Burney, it would probably be less expensive to go to a half-day kindergarten model as opposed to the full-day model that's there. So we don't have anything out in the far right-hand column in terms of showing an approximate savings, because at this point there is no impact to the general fund, but there could be. So that's what this tries to express.
So what you're saying is that Alice Burney would be the only school that would have half-day?
No.
All of them would go half-day?
Well, contractually, half-day kindergarten is what our language reads, and you know, until we have an agreement to do a full-day kindergarten, that actually is the contract language. So that's part of what we're reflecting, of what is already been agreed to. In addition, the thought was if we need to go out and buy a portable, or we need to buy 2 portables, whether it's at Alice Burney or some other elementary school, that would be an additional cost to the district that we wouldn't need if we were in a half-day kindergarten program, because then 2 classes use 1 classroom. So you wouldn't have to buy the portable. That would be the savings.
Have morning and afternoon.
AM, PM, like what we used to have historically.
If we went to a half-day kindergarten, we would lose so many students. We wouldn't need any more portables.
Absolutely not.
I think it
They would
was
be
a
going
step
to the other
forward to go to
districts.
full-day
Yeah,
kindergarten.
I do
Yeah.
too.
It would be a
I do
huge
too.
step back to go back to
Especially now that so many, both parents have to work,
Yeah.
and childcare is getting more and more difficult to get. Preschool is very expensive, a lot of them, and they can't afford it, and kids, actually what kids are getting in kindergarten now is first what they used to get in 1st and 2nd grade, really. And it's not what we consider the old kind of kindergarten. So we've got these kids who will be coming into 1st grade with lesser skills, and they already have lesser skills than what they need in 1st grade now.
And I think that's why we didn't put a cost savings associated with this, because we
There's
were
no
just.
number over there to say yes to.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm
It was
hearing no.
just for you guys. I think,
Okay.
well, first of all, it's not necessarily up to the board to say no, because that is a negotiable item. However, it certainly gives us direction from the board. But that's why we didn't indicate it as a cost savings, but only that it could be a cost to the district if we maintain full-day kindergartens and we have to get portables. It's just for the board to be aware of that.
I'm hearing 5 no votes on this, so.
So is this, the portable that's listed here, is this adding, I understand if you needed to add a portable, or does this take into account the portable that we went and looked at that needs to be replaced?
This is replacing that portable we went to look at, and that would be the cost of the double portable to be put onto the Alice Burney.
Because, so this is talking about doing, this was talking about doing that if we needed another classroom, and we were, isn't
we
that
still
something
need
we
to
were
do it
already talking
anyway.
about needing to do anyway?
But that's not for this
Whether we do
conversation,
that or
but yeah,
not.
we really need
Well,
to do that.
I think the difference would be is we could replace it with a single portable or replace it with a double portable. If we need the classroom size for adding another kindergarten, it would be a double versus a single, and it would be the difference in cost between those 2 portables.
Okay, Okay, item number 4, NNDCC. And Darren, can you
What does that
tell me
stand
what
for?
that means?
It's Navy National Defense Cadet Corps.
Okay.
So going from the junior ROTC is just another name the Navy came up with because contractually, since we're not meeting 100 kids and 2 instructors, we can't, by Congress standards, be called a junior ROTC.
Right.
All right.
And like he indicated today, last time we met, we weren't sure that was going to be approved, though we had applied, but they have indicated approval for the program.
Well, I'm one who doesn't want to cut that program.
Well, the main question I had on this one was just the utilizing 2 of the HROP periods, so maybe decreasing some other HROP classes, and I was just wondering
I can
what
tell you
they
where
all
we
are.
We have 23 sections currently in ROP, and what I can say is that Rick Jordan and I met to look at what we're currently offering and what would it look like if we were to do this, as well as looking at some other things that we're thinking about with regional occupation programs. An example, though no decision has been made yet, we have 0.4 in work experience through ROP, and work experience is going away. It won't even be allowed in a couple of years. So that was for example, where we were thinking maybe we would discontinue that now and then move that 0.4 over. And I talked with John Sapper last week, who's from the County Office of Ed, and we'll need to meet and present him our proposal, because obviously they have the kind of final say with what the sections go to. But that's an example of how we're working through that process.
Okay.
Of course, we want about 27 seconds from them, and they're only wanting to give us 23, but we're going to continue to encourage getting more.
For right now, it's showing an encroachment of 78,000.
Right. That would be without getting any support from the regional,
So-
regional ROP.
What is the potential savings if we're able to, and it sounded like we were going to be able to do this with HRLP.
Yeah.
So what kind of savings are we looking at there?
And that,
It's the $31,000 that's shown.
Okay.
yeah.
So roughly 0.4% of, 40% of the program would be HROP funded.
So the cost fund over here on the right that it's costing us would go down by this 31,000?
Yes.
That's correct.
And that would be if we eliminated some HROP and this became HROP? Is that how you?
A section of it, yeah. We only get so many sections, so it's transferring, it's
This
eliminating
into
or
a section.
and moving it over.
Without beating this dead horse too much longer, I haven't heard anyone that's in favor of eliminating the Navy program. It serves our goals. It keeps kids in school. It is
Good PR.
it's a huge piece that keeps ADA up.
So-
And it,
I'm hearing 5 votes
No.
to keep the program.
Yeah.
And work on getting it.
Work on HROP.
Okay.
yeah,
And,
without a doubt.
and we've got 31,000 in savings there.
I have a question that's related to that. And we send out our enrollment packets for the 8th graders in March, February, end of February, early March?
Early March. Yesterday. So-
Yesterday. Was this program included in that packet? Thank you.
We were presumptive, I guess, presuming.
Well, we ran into this problem before. We were talking about cutting programs, so they didn't go out in the registration packets. So then when we didn't cut them, nobody enrolled in them. We had, issues with classes that weren't full because we were unsure. And it just occurred to me we might be running into that time thing. And
So it was in the
I'm
program.
happy to hear that.
It was in the registration packets.
That somebody second-guessed us and
Well, and sometimes we do add more, and then if things change, then we have to pull it out.
It's easier to say, I'm sorry, we can't do this, and to have empty classes, which
Right.
defeats the whole
Absolutely.
purpose of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so NNDCC is a go. Item number 5. Now, you have closed Eureka Adult School here, and you have 398,000, but Sandy Phillips had a nice, great presentation a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Where she came up with $131,000 worth of savings. And personally, I think we should go with that.
I do too.
I have a question because
Do you want her to come up and remind
Yes.
the board what those say, okay. Just so that everybody knows what it is we would be reducing.
So, Paul and I talked a little yesterday, and so I think there's some clarifications that need to be made. When you add up the savings made program by program that are indicated on these pie charts that I gave you at the last meeting, they add up to the, what did you say, 131,000. But that was not the extent of the cuts, because what we did, what I did, is I went programmatically through each program and said, okay, this is what we're spending on salaries, health and welfare, all of those expenses. Not included in this. So what I'm telling you is that the cuts are much bigger if we adopt this. The cuts add up to be more than the 138,000, because what I did is I said, okay, this is what we could survive on if we just pay salaries and health and welfare and our indirects and that kind of thing. If we just pay that, that's what's left. So I think Paul can do a way better job of kind of explaining what the entire savings would be if we were to accept all of the recommendations, because it adds up to be quite a bit more than 138.
Boy, I want to hear this.
Okay.
I can. Okay. Here we go. So it really is. It's kind of encapsulated in option 2, and in essence, what we say is we keep the break-even programs, we keep the programs that operate in the black, and the only program that we hold on to in this scenario that doesn't break even is the ACLC concurrent students. I don't know what an ACLC is, but anyway. But that's the opportunity for students that are falling behind to work concurrently so they can get themselves back on track, right. High school students. Beyond that, it would contemplate eliminating the ESL, EL civics, the job market, the adult learning center. There's a reduction of payroll from the director. And again, we were able to take a look at the budget and say there's a placeholder, a pretty significant one in there. Do we really need to have that in there, or can we eliminate the expense that represents? And the answer to that was yes, and that was about $70,000 or $75,000. So that being said, we think that we can take the net encroachment down from about $400,000 to somewhere between $75,000 to $100,000 by eliminating those 4 or 5 programs that we talked about.
So basically, it's if the board approved option 2.
Correct.
About a $300,000 savings.
Correct.
Does that leave the CNA program in place?
Yes.
Who will direct the program without a director?
We would have to look at other administration absorbing that responsibility.
I have a question about that.
CNA is certified nursing.
There was a time that Greg suggested that we could create a position that was a grant writer. And I know that other districts, especially in these hard times economically, are really looking at grants as a big source of their funding. And it was a full-time position that he at one point thought would pay for itself and was willing to actually offer that position to someone for 2 years at whatever salary that they were making at the time. I have a hard time, because we've made so many cuts, and especially in administration too, that I think that adult ed could survive without a director. But I wonder if adult ed could survive with half a director and half a grant writer.
I think that's a really good question. It's easy to say, well, look, we can save all this money. Just cut this one position, that one person.
Nothing's that simple.
But
I'm just wondering
I
if it's
think
worth exploring the possibility and have conversations about it at some other point in time.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable eliminating the director if we have a future in the adult ed world,
I agree.
because we have to come back.
Right.
It may be 2 or 3 years out. The other half of that question is, are we a K-12 district? Do we have any business in the adult ed world, though it's really good for our community? Do we have any business in preschool? I think it's incredibly important that we address those kids that need more support before they ever get to us. But we are a K-12 district. And so I think our decision really has to be, if we belong in the adult ed world, if we're going to keep our foot in the adult ed education, we have to keep a director.
I agree.
And I think that some of the ending fund balance that we've been living off of for a while was all generated by adult ed.
Some?
Well, a very large chunk of it, I think. So what number do we look at if we accept the recommendations of the cuts minus the cut of the director? Do we have a idea?
We
Have
do.
you looked in, have you done much collaboration with College of the Redwoods? Do they, I mean, I know that
I
some
have
of the departments,
done,
but.
we have done a lot of collaboration, and we have collaborated with College of the Redwoods. I have really good relationships with, especially the Career Tech Center that they have, the downtown center. We've done quite a bit of collaboration. The majority of our collaboration and our extra monies are coming from Employment Development Department, CalWorks money, those kind of things. We're working, we've got a lot of partnerships. Even with the 2020 initiative. So, yeah, that's what we do.
I was kind of wondering about was with this cut, then there wouldn't really be any place for people to get their diploma or their GED, or to take those people that need to go back and do that.
Right.
Where would they do that?
Another thing that has changed since I presented this to you is if we were to make the recommended cuts, there is a little bit of wiggle room to move some CalWorks money around. I've talked to our representatives at CDE who have given me the go-ahead to spend some of our CalWorks money. It's not a lot of money. It's $40,000. And right now that money is earmarked in this document that I gave you guys last time, is earmarked for two things, and that is workforce skills certification and computer and business training. What we can do is pull that $42,000 out of those two programs, and Employment Development Department has kind of agreed at this point to pick up that baton, so that would become a revenue neutral program. In other words, we would run it and then we would invoice them. So that's a savings that we could then plug into the Academic and Learning Center. That's what ACLC stands for. That's where people go to get their GED, their high school diploma, and their adult basic education. So we're able to kind of patch a little bit of that back. It won't be half of what it currently is, but at least there would be something.
So for tonight, why don't we just agree to accept the recommendations with the exception of the director? That would be about a $240,000 savings, more or less, and then explore the possibility of a half-time director and half-time grant writer, and leave that part of the decision for another night.
And if I could just jump in, John, for the sake of the argument, that would change the savings to about a $200,000 savings.
200, okay.
I agree.
I would be much more comfortable with that, because there's no point in having a program unless you have someone to direct
To
it.
oversee it.
Right.
You've got to do all of that background stuff in order to save the 40, to get the 20, to do the partnerships.
And if you have a partnership, is what I was going to say, and there's nobody for the partners to talk to, why?
Right. it's not gonna work.
It's not one of those things that can be absorbed by other people.
No.
To me, I mean,
Not
that
easily.
just seems like.
You're right.
Too many
It's a lot of
people
work.
Absorbing already.
Okay, so I hear 5 votes for
Are
that
you
suggestion.
comfortable with that?
Let's not go there.
Okay,
Nobody's
So-
comfortable.
so I guess get her off the spot,
Yeah.
is we're looking at option 2 minus the director.
And explore
And a-
the other option.
Right.
director,
Halftime director,
half
halftime grant writer, and see what other,
Explore.
okay.
Okay, number 6.
I'm sorry, so what number did we get to write down?
200.
Excuse me just 1 minute though, but we also would not be eliminating the ACLC. Actually, you had worked out a way that we could save
That
it,
we could save
Yeah,
part of it.
Part of it.
So it'd be reducing.
because I think that we have to have some place for the kids to get their
Yes.
GEDs.
Yeah.
No other.
This is for the adults to get theirs. The kids are going to get it through the concurrent. That was already left in there. Right. Yeah, it was just for clarification. We had not eliminated the high school kids being able to get theirs.
right.
It's the adults.
Okay.
Okay, number
Okay.
6, reduce support of secondary sports programs. And 2 weeks ago, we were talking that we had somewhere between 700 and 800 kids participating in sports.
If you want to lose ADA,
Yeah.
We would
do
lose
that.
a lot of ADA.
move forward with that one.
We just brought you our ideas.
And I think we should just skip this one.
That's a no.
No.
5 no's. Number 7, transportation.
If he-
Reconfigure bus boundaries, et cetera.
If he can squeak 166,000 out of that thing, more power to him.
Unfortunately, Dan isn't here to talk about what a $166,000 reduction looks like, but
I think we presented it to you before as a couple of options. It would mean redoing our routes, and it may mean extending the walking distance. And I know it also, boy, do I have it with me? This is what I meant. Okay, so some of the ways he was going to reduce it, for example, I mean, obviously, we would work on it, but it would be to eliminate, for example, all the contracted mechanics inspections that we do for feeder schools, which would save us like $2,000. Eliminating the Zobarn bus route is $14,000. So there were some differences in order for him to get to this amount.
I don't understand what you meant about the mechanics. What was that?
We service the other buses.
And don't they pay for it?
They do, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not a cost even. It actually costs us some.
Charge
Let's
him
just
more.
charge him double.
More, 'cause I think.
It should be at least a break even, if
At
not a
least a
profit.
wash.
If they send it to a mechanic, they'd make a profit.
That's
Okay.
right. So I would like to see us
Double the
continue
rate.
to do it and come up with what it costs.
There must be a reason why
So we
he
don't
said
lose money
that,
on it.
because
He's
So-
not here to
Explain
explain
the
it. I know for a
possibility.
while, to be honest with you, we didn't have a mechanic to do some of this. We
Yeah,
just
we
hired
didn't.
one
But I think
not
we
that long
hired
ago.
one.
We do now, but it's been within a
Yeah.
year. So some of those contracts may have had to run their lifespan.
Could have been.
And so that would be my guess, because we operated
Adjust the
without
contract.
one
This
for
might
a
be a
while.
place to generate some revenue.
But it's only a couple $1,000s here and there, but,
But that's,
This is one area we
We're
do need
talking-
to be careful in that if we cut transportation too much, we'll start having higher
losing students
absenteeism.
again.
right.
But I would, for now, accept his figure of 166.
Okay?
I'm sorry. What we were talking about with that net encroachment reduction was basically getting it down to the level where we didn't have to rebench our appropriation. But I don't believe that there's a plan in place
Right.
that comes up with $167,000 worth of reduction.
No, his-
So all we were saying was, here's the number that we would put out there if we were going to get down to the 95% of what our appropriation is.
that's more important.
Yeah.
'Cause
So
he's not-
there is no plan in place other than eliminating bus routes to be able
Right.
to take care of that.
And I couldn't tell you what that plan, what that would look like
So we
exactly.
can't really count on this amount.
This
Correct.
is.
We cannot.
We
and
cannot,
this
not
is-
without
but
pretty
This is
significant
for the
changes.
second interim.
This
I'm
is,
sorry.
This is a number for the second interim.
And then that could be changed again for the final.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm hearing is, let's keep that number in there and do what we can to get to that number?
Yes.
And then bring it back later.
It makes a big difference in what it is. If this is not a representation of what he thinks he can cut out of his budget and still provide the services that we have,
It would
that's
not
one
provide the
thing.
services.
If this is just, okay, this is the amount that we can eliminate and still receive our placeholder for services, that's a totally different thing. We're talking about cutting students out of our, not transporting students. I'm
There's
not
an-
comfortable
I
with that.
misunderstood what you said, and I'm disappointed that we don't have a plan. I thought this was the
Well,
time that plans would
Here's
be.
We have
what I can
plans
read
that-
of what Dan
yeah.
put together. So to a savings of $214,000, which I know is more than the number we're talking about here, but it's one of the options he put out, which is to eliminate all in-town home-to-school busing, reduce current busing from 6 home-to-school and 3 special ed routes to 3 home-to-school and 3 special ed routes. That was one of the options he threw out there. Another, again, the same, similar amount of savings, provide morning-only home-to-school busing and morning and afternoon special ed busing. Leave them at school, let the parents pick them up.
It's just,
I think we need to not,
Bring your sleeping bag.
I think this one needs to be a no until it's more
I think so,
specific,
too.
because this is a very risky.
Or even take 66,000
Can we
out of it.
skip this one until we see our
Yeah.
final
Yes.
numbers? Can we just?
yep, skip.
Can we do that? Is that okay?
Yep.
I would like to keep it in there. Because this, again, is not a required service. It is not a K-12 educational service. If he's put that number down, he's got a way to do it. And we have to get
But-
the second
but you
interim
need-
in, and
Disagree
you
with
need
that.
a number to put out on that page.
So the number that's in there, the 167, is my number. Basically, working backwards to say, how much could we reduce and still remain at that benchmark level that we wouldn't lose potential future revenue from the state? And that potential future transportation revenue is anybody's guess as to how that's going to come down the
So
pipe.
let's come back to this after we've gone through the other
Okay.
items.
Either that or just take off part of the money.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
thought at one
I accept
last
that.
meeting, I asked for if there was any numbers that showed what we lost in ADA based on absences from the time that we cut busing 2 years ago. Did we come up with any, was there anything tangible to report?
The numbers remained fairly constant
Yeah, they
over
did.
that
They
period
they
of
were,
time.
yeah, negligible, if not almost exactly the same. We did look into that.
And it wasn't
Okay, number-
significant.
Significant. It was not significant.
Number 8, food services. Reduce staff by 1.5.
So, right now, a couple recommendations within it, but the bottom line right now is that food services runs about a $250,000 encroachment. A couple of the ideas that we had talked about, and we're continuing to look at different ways, creative ways to try to either increase revenue or reduce expense. But right on the nail right now is a potential of reducing staff by 1.5, and that yields about a $50,000 savings. We also looked at eliminating breakfast. I think we wanted to take another good look at that, but the first time through says that the savings there are negligible to none.
Well,
At one time, the encroachment was like 80 or 100,000. That seemed to be what we put into budgets over past years.
100,000.
And now it's 200,000. I guess my question is, why did that occur, and can we get back to that 100,000 encroachment?
That's what we're shooting for, Hank. So the first step, the one that we can identify right off the bat, gets us 50 of that 150 in terms of some reductions there. Probably better for Arlene to talk about all these things, but we could potentially change the type of meals that we serve. We could call Arlene to help out.
Sure
Well,
he does.
I know we have an extremely high-quality program.
We do.
And-
Excellent program.
And I've been down and toured the facility. It's, knock-dead program. But is that what's costing us the money, the extra 100,000?
In our adopted budget, The cafeteria fund encroachment was 300,940
Right.
something. And actual in our interim, it went down to 299,477. So it's a little less than we expected, but it hadn't been
So-
less than that.
So, and the encroachment very quickly is for this year larger than that for two reasons. First, we try to keep an ending fund balance of 300,000 because food services is its own fund and therefore supposed to remain in a positive cash position. And we estimate that a $300,000 ending balance provides them enough to show at least a little bit of cash in there at the end of the year, so they don't run in the negative. So that's the reason to try to stay at 300,000 for the ending fund balance. We were below that, so part of the encroachment this year is pushing them back up to that $300,000 level. They dropped down to 250 or 258, something like that. They also had some one-time expenditures, refitting the food service vehicles with
I was just looking at the number,
particulates.
the difference between what they're bringing in, their revenues and their expenditures. So it matched the number for the ending fund balance coincidentally, but I'm saying that they're
So
spending 300,000 more than they're making.
So you reduce the encroachment by lowering the amount of their reserve fund to?
No.
What I did, I'm sorry, the encroachment is an adjusted number. We took out the one-time expenditures and the one-time events to say this is their ongoing deficit, if you will, and that turns out to be an operating deficit of about $257,000.
Okay, so why don't we let Arlene answer the question?
So ask the question again, please.
I don't know who asked.
Question is why?
At one time, and it's been probably 3 or 4 years ago, the encroachment was approximately $100,000. And now it's $250,000. So we now have a much larger encroachment. Why is it that way, and what caused it, and what can we do about it?
Okay. I think part of our encroachment problem is the declining enrollment. For all the ADA, I get entitlement dollars, so our food cost goes up because I don't have the entitlement dollars to spend on the food. It comes out of the cash part. There is also food costs in general just go up, and I'm trying to make improvements as we go along. There'll be some additional, I'm $30,000 food cost ahead behind. My food cost has increased $30,000 more alone just this year. We're watching our food costs. I mean, at the elementary levels, we use our we've gone back to making our entree item with commodity food and the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Their offerings aren't there as much. I can make a cut, as I mentioned at the other meeting, what would be in the Domino's Pizza. We currently spend around $68,000 with them. It's at the high school level. If we took away the pizza, that could possibly have the kids go off the campus. So that's I'm trying to keep their interest there.
Which costs money. If they're not eating at the school,
pardon me?
We lose the dollars. Well, it's significant to state the reason why that's important, that if they leave campus and don't eat and they are entitled to a free and reduced lunch, if they don't like what's offered, they won't eat, and then we don't get the dollars for that, so it reduces our income.
Right.
And we do well on pizza anyway, don't we?
We do. I mean, it's more expensive, and we now...
But the kids like it. We went to that other one for a while, and the kids didn't like it.
Right.
Wouldn't eat it.
Right. Domino's does a great job. Rick is great to work with. The kids like the product. We've tried. Most of my experience has been at Eureka High School, so I've gone the gamut of what we've offered, what we haven't offered. When we first started there, we were just operating the snack bar and the 2 serving lines at the high school. Then we expanded it, and we were selling all the Little Debbies and all the junk and all that stuff. And we had a great a la carte program. And one of the things that we have done is we've eliminated the a la carte, hoping that the kids will have the whole meals. And we've structured the meals at the high school level so that they take 2 choices, and that counts as a meal. By eliminating the a single slice pizza or whatever, the a la carte sales have dipped, and that shows significant on our bottom line. But we've also had Subway sandwiches come in. We've had the little deli over there. We did hot wings. We did stir-fried rice. I mean, we've tried everything. Nothing seems to, in my experience and opinion, seems to draw additional students in. We're feeding the same number. I think the kids just want to go off campus or wander around, and I think closing campus would be an ideal situation from my point of view. There has the logistics of doing that is not so, but
let me tell you how many times I've been at Burger King at lunch. My brother's taking Burger King for lunch.
Right.
And the high school kids have been there, and I'd say, high school kid, yeah.
Right.
What are you doing here? And besides that, you're late for class.
Right, and that's one of the things. Past principals we've had discussions about that, and once the kids do go off campus to get Burger King or whatever they're going for, they kind of tend to wander and not come back.
So what do you charge for a slice of pizza now?
$2.25 for just a slice, $2.50 for the entire lunch. So we're always encouraging them to have, the fruit.
So it sounds like prices haven't really increased in quite a while.
No, and I don't think that you would really recoup that much revenue with an increase of price because most of the kids are eligible students.
So what's the downside of closing the campus at lunch?
Supervision.
In supervision,
because it's not an enclosed.
I feel already I'm shrinking in my chair. I hate to ask this question. I don't want anything thrown at me, but that's just a bad idea.
It's it's a wide open campus. It'd be very hard to do. It'd be almost.
It would not be popular.
If you're going to close it, then you have to police it.
Yeah, and you have to probably put a fence around it and do all those kinds of things.
It's not going to happen.
So I would be in favor of
it.
Right now, freshmen are not supposed to leave campus, right?
They implemented that when I was still at the high school, and
so
I'm
let's
not sure where it's at now.
Let's accept the 50 and move on. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
What is the reduction of staff?
The reduction of staff is an anticipated vacancy, and we just won't fill it. We currently have 2 roving positions that were built into our structure when we went from every individual kitchen to the central kitchen. And we have some wonderful substitutes, and sometimes, not very often, but the rovers don't have items to do. They don't go out, people aren't absent. The rover in the senior food service rover, the halftime rover, actually has been an ongoing issue, and she's actually doing half clerical, which has been brought up to brought up as she's actually a white collar person. So we've entertained that idea. That's kind of come and gone as the necessity has come. We've had bigger fish to fry, so that kind of got pushed aside. But we'll.
So we're not talking about somebody losing their job for this 1.5 FTE. This is an expected vacancy. You're not going to.
We have for the full-time. We have 1 full-time vacancy, and then it would create a lot of bumping to move. Let me see if I can get this in my head right. If we moved I guess the answer would be straight out no. We would move the person in the office, the senior food service rover, to the kitchen, because she's a food service person, move to the kitchen, and I guess
It starts the bumping.
It would start the bumping, and yes, and there would be a rehire of the other half-time as
clerical.
As a clerical, and then there'd
We'll
be
leave
one
the details
Yeah.
to her. We want to try to end this before midnight. I think we should forget about the idea of eliminating breakfast, accept the $50,540, and move on to the next item.
I think we should also try and advertise our breakfast. See if we can.
I have put some public service announcements out, and they do run. I hear they run. I've not heard them, but other people have said that. And Paul and I are working on some creative.
So we're going to mark down the 50,540.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 5 yeses. Number 9, reduce energy, $50,000. So this is a no-brainer.
Warning, we're turning off the heat here. You will all need jackets and long johns.
Yep.
Okay, item number 10, reduce general fund travel and conference.
Another no-brainer.
Another no-brainer.
Okay.
Number 12, materials and supplies, or number
Textbooks.
11, textbook purchases, 100,000, and I think this is something,
That went from 120 down to 100, wasn't it 120?
It did. We changed from 120 to 100 after we had a chance to go through the numbers and the demands there. We did revise that number downwards.
so
I think some of it was replacing intervention materials and doing, really looking more at what our replacement costs would be.
So
We're
this
a
is-
little broader.
this is something we could probably do for a year or two. I mean, it's not indefinite out.
Right,
into
probably
the
at least a
future.
couple years.
But
Mhm.
Not true.
we should go ahead and leave it in the cuts for today.
Yep.
Yes.
I was thinking we had 120 there.
So we're leaving it out?
We're leaving the 100 in.
Yeah.
Okay, materials and supplies, seems like the same idea, 42,400, reducing by 10%.
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
5 yeses. Elementary, maximizing class sizes.
These are negotiable.
No, the maximizing class sizes would be going up to current contract numbers only. It's not increasing them over that.
And so that would be a savings of 127.6.
That's correct. Part of the offset of increasing the class sizes would mean a decrease in the class size reduction revenue.
Mhm.
Nothing nobody wants to see, but
Well,
this is
Number
something we
one, I
have to
want
do.
to know, I need a refresher on what the maximum class size is.
It's right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see. Oops. And so the amount is 127.6?
Yeah.
This, I think, is, I'm totally not, I'm against this.
I am too.
I think it's only $127,000. I mean, half of that is not serving pizza. I just don't, every grade school that I visited, this was the big thing that every teacher and every principal talked about was class size and also the combo classes, which I think when I talked to you earlier, Paul, you said that was another possibility, was more combo classes, and those are
Yeah.
really
That's a
difficult.
possibility.
And I
Yep.
just, I really don't want to, I wouldn't say yes to this.
I wouldn't either.
Increasing class sizes would have just as much possibility of reducing combo classes as increasing combo classes. It's all a matter of how.
possible.
It would depend on how we would structure it.
If you go either
It is not a
direction.
given that it would
No,
increase
it
combo.
isn't either way, but it could go both ways, but I'm not in favor of.
This
any
isn't
more
what's
students
best
in class.
educationally for the students at
I
all.
don't
So we're
think
talking
that's-
about going from 20.45, and that .45 kid is
No.
interesting, to 25.
No, everything from the total K-3 CSR revenue down is just a description of how the K-3 class size reduction revenue calculation works.
So we are currently
What is our
at
maximum
23.
size?
It's 31 in elementary school.
Well, it depends on the grade level. If we have an AM, PM kindergarten, it's 29. If we have a
Not
full
having an
day,
AM,
I know, I'm just giving you what the contract says. If we have full day kindergarten, what we have worked out with ETA is a class size of 24. First, second, and third grade are class sizes of 27, unless it's a combination, then it's one less. But we've been averaging about 24. And then the upper grades are 31, again, unless it's a combination, then it's one less. So,
Not now, forever, 31 kids. in
well, I can say
Or
we've
even
been.
the lower grades.
We've been operating closer to that 30, 31 in the upper grades. It's the K through 3 that we've kept the class sizes smaller than the contract language.
So
What are the,
what are they now, and what would they be?
What are they averaging now?
They're averaging under 24 because are around 24, 23, 24, so that we can keep that class size reduction money
That's up
coming
through
in.
third
That- We're
grade.
talking about the.
Third grade, yes.
Okay,
And then,
what are the upper grades averaging?
and I would say it depends on the site. Sometimes we are full at fourth, fifth, or sixth, depending on the site, and then sometimes we might have at a site a fourth grade class with
What does full mean?
31.
31.
Yeah, 30 to 31, or we could have an elementary school that might only have 26 in it or 25 in it. That's at fifth grade.
So right now, we have a range in the upper grades.
We have a range from
25 to 31.
That would be reasonable to
27
say.
But more classes closer to 31.
More classes closer to 31.
And in the lower grades?
We have been keeping it under 24.
So it'd be adding 3, maybe 3 for the primary grades and anywhere from 4 to 0 more.
Anywhere
in the
from like
upper
6 to,
grades.
yeah.
I want to just make a comment that these are budget numbers, projections for the second interim, that we're trying to achieve this $2 million thing.
Right.
We currently are using the class size maximums in the upper grade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is not a change.
Right.
We are trying to keep them as low as possible. Educationally, it only makes sense to do that. But for budgeting purposes, what we're saying is to write down the 127,600.
Yeah, but to write it down is saying we're going to implement it.
That's what it was saying right now, to give us some flexibility to look at other things that may come up between now and June.
I would be in favor of going with the number tonight and then having that as one of our first add-backs.
And that's where I am. I'm not in favor of increasing class size. But in essence, that's what we're doing currently, trying to keep them down and really targeting K-3 as it is.
I'm in favor of skipping it for now and looking to see, finish the rest of it and going back with that other one.
I agree, that's as far as I'm going to go.
And that's
is-
as far as I'll go.
I'll take a look at it in a second.
That's fine, let's move on. We can,
We're not going to have it in.
We can come back to it.
3-2.
Was it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
John and I want it added in.
3-2 against.
Okay, 14, secondary certificated.
And again, the majority of that is really related to our ongoing declining enrollment. As we know, our secondary schools, Zane and Eureka High School, are continuing to decline, and therefore, staffing isn't going to, frankly, won't need as many staff.
And what does master schedule refinement?
What that means is looking at, for example, when I talked with Dennis Scott, principal at Zane, earlier today, some of our core classes even are only running at 22 or 23 kids. So maximizing master schedule refinement would be looking at not having as many sections in, I'll pick language arts, for example, in 7th grade, so that there's more student, increases the student enrollment, but it decreases the cost.
So I heard secondhand, someone was told that music was being eliminated at Zane.
Music's not being eliminated at Zane.
But that there was a possibility in master schedule refinement that certain music programs could be eliminated to refine the master schedule.
Well, I would say anytime that you look at refining a schedule, you look at electives. But the conversations that we've had is it would only be reductions, not elimination. And if there's particular programs that we feel do draw students, those wouldn't necessarily be the initial ones targeted.
One of the refinements that I've heard is the whole business is 0 periods, which gets in the way of other scheduling.
And that would be more true at the high school than it is at Zane, because right now Zane only offers 2 0 periods anyway. But anytime you have a 0 period and kids have to stay through 6th period, that's an additional cost to the district.
Which is my point.
Yeah, and so, for example, we have a 0-period PE, which they can have a class size of 40 kids, and they are operating maybe in the mid-20s. So, the recommendation would be to look at putting that 0-period down into, doing it 1st through 6th, like a traditional PE, versus 0 through 5th.
So assuming that we accept this item, that before anything is finalized in the master schedule, that the board would be able to take a look at it?
We've always brought them, or not always, but the last couple of years, we have brought the master schedule to the board at least on it seems about twice a year.
Right.
And so it certainly would also be brought to the board again, but at least at this point, we know we have to do some refinement because we're operating classes.
So with that in mind, I'd like to keep this
Well,
in our list of
I need to have clarification on that, because by the time we bring the master schedule to the board, the schools have been working on it for months. Right. It's to bring it to the board sight unseen at that point in time, and then the board go, nope, we don't like that.
But again, it is not our job to micromanage that. If they can refine their master schedule, that is our job to support them.
Do you hear that? I understand that, but I'm talking. Let me get specific here. For instance, the jazz band has been a tradition, a culture at Eureka City Schools for 40, 50 years now. It can go away in master schedule refinement because it's a 0-period class. It only actually works as a 0-period class because they have to pull children from the other music classes, which means they have to have 2 electives, and at the middle school they only get 1 unless they take a 0-period.
I've built those schedules.
So that schedule could include elimination of the jazz band by definition of refinement, and it comes to the board after they've already worked out their master schedule. At that point in time, it would be really difficult for the board to say, no, toss that out and start over again, because it included elimination of jazz band. Yes. I'm being very specific here, and I don't know what other programs, and when I'm talking about the programs that we offer, that is the board's responsibility. That we have a say-so in what electives we offer our students and what programs and academic things that we offer our students. That's not micromanaging, that's making sure that our goals and objectives as a board are maintained.
Did not we don't have a vocal music at Zane anymore, do we?
It went away with the last master schedule refinement
and
section.
that was in the last master schedule.
Right.
And we didn't know about it until?
I mean, I can throw in my 2 bits or whatever it's worth. I hope I can.
Dennis, I'm sorry, you want to come up here, please?
Speaking also.
If you hear the thunder again.
How come there's no, maybe there's no sound? Just hear the loud sounds.
It's always difficult when you have to do trimming of master schedule, and it seems like that's all we've had to do for a number of years now in schools. But really, at Zane, I think I represent this properly at this point in time, and believe me, nothing's final or totally concrete in my mind about the best way to put together a master schedule. We do have to make some big changes in our elective program because we are way overstaffed in electives. I can tell you that much. Does it mean that we're cutting music? No, I'm actually trying to find a way to add in a section of choral music and hang on to most of what we have. Obviously, to do that, there's got to be some shuffling and some other things have to change somewhere. But that's when we talk about readjusting our master schedule. A lot of our elective classes have pretty small class loads, so that's an area that we have to work on, and that it involves a lot of things. You're aware that we have a 7th grade wheel with 3 classes a year for our 7th graders. That may have to be adjusted. We may not be able to continue doing that. There's just a number of things like that to look at, and then I'm trying to do some. I guess I would say, I'll call them creative. I don't know whether they are or not, but some things with our elective programs that help us have a campus that is more student involved, that gives kids the things that are produce things like digital media, meaning newspaper and yearbook and those kind of things, as classes rather than as things that we have to do outside. And hopefully, within all of this, be able to work with what we have to do and the reductions that we have to do in staffing.
But the
And actual-
problem is with that is that the master schedule comes out and say you've had to reduce, so you're gonna have to eliminate teachers, and we have to have teachers that notices out on the 15th of March.
Yeah.
So,
So,
And again,
We're aware of that. Yeah.
staff has
Well,
always
I know
refined
you
the
are.
master schedule every year,
right.
and it's being brought back to us, and I'm sure Dennis
Okay.
and Rick Jordan would keep in mind that the board has certain concerns,
Right.
and that we're willing to
Absolutely.
say no
Right, yeah.
and do the difficult thing.
I think that we have heard the board's concerns, and I would say that we have
So let's keep
responded
this-
to that, but I think, again, that we do need some flexibility because we are overstaffed, and we need to be able to address that.
So let's keep this in the list of cuts, accept it, and move on.
That's my vote. We have to keep something in the list.
can I ask one question? We didn't even look at hourly. What's hourly? You mean cutting no overtime? Is that what that means? Or do we have?
It could be a combination of
Well, there's
things. We
no
do have,
FTE on that, so it's not a teacher or any.
right, it's just, teachers,
$119,395 for hourly.
it adds up.
Are those
What is
people?
it?
Yeah, and
Oh,
usually, I mean, it's like, for example, if we run an intervention class, they could, that could be categorically funded, then that would be an hourly rate that teacher,
And then maybe it should be hourly employment or something like that, because hourly just sort of,
versus a FTE,
yeah.
it's dollars that represent paying somebody hourly.
To do an for instance, the teachers that maybe are paid extra to do intervention in some school.
It could be, but this is a general fund relief, and typically the categorical supports intervention.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
If it
But
is
it's looking at
intervention.
how much hourly classes or support or whatever you
So
want to call
what-
it that we're giving.
So give me an example of what that is.
Doesn't make any sense.
What? Give me an example of a hourly to $119,395 worth.
Well, one of the things that we have looked at too is, for example, looking at CIS and home and hospital, for example, sometimes we have teachers that don't have the students yet. And they're hourly, and so the recommendation would be, and we've done this before, where we start with the hourly rate that we have students for, and then build as we get them, rather than starting where they don't have students yet.
Okay.
So I heard-
And we, and then we add as we need them. So right now, we have more than 2 hourly certificated staff serving home and hospital. We have
Oh, okay.
2+. And so it's really looking at, is there a way to streamline
Okay, so
those
that
costs?
people that are doing that, they're not on the regular, are they on they're on the regular salary schedule?
They're paid hourly now. The home and hospital teachers are paid hourly. They have their
So
own
if they don't
schedule
have
in the
any
contract.
students, They're paid, so, for instance, if I'm a home and hospital teacher and I have one student, am I only paid for that one student, or am I paid for 6 hours?
If you're the 2 permanent staff, you're guaranteed a certain number of hours per year.
All right.
Okay, I've heard 2 votes for accepting this cut, and do I hear more, or what do I hear?
I'm concerned about it.
Concerned about all.
No, I'm really concerned about this because it has to do with kids and what we offer in the way of programs and things.
Well, you heard Dennis say, though, that we're significantly
I
overstaffed.
heard what
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I.
Well, because the master schedule comes back, I mean, it's a little bit of a safety net for me.
You can what?
I
Accept it or
can
not?
accept it, and
Can we?
There's a
Okay,
threshold.
so we've got 3 votes.
I would just hope that we could get some more detail
Clarification.
and clarification as to what the master schedule refinement would eliminate.
Couldn't we
Before it's had so much work into it that, like she was saying, if we could get a heads up that this is what I'm looking at getting rid of, or so that we could have some idea of that.
And it may be an
just add
agenda
the
item also.
234 and the 119,395 and take out the 130 for now?
No.
And just do,
No,
decrease it that much?
You know, my recommendation is that we accept it as is right now, because we need flexibility to address our declining enrollment, and part of that's got to be the master schedule refinement. It has to be.
So let me get this right though. Other than I'm still confused on the hourly, but you're talking, these are actually people that need notices by
Yes.
March 15th.
Two of them are,
And we can
yes.
always bring them back.
Yes.
And we have in the past noticed more people than we actually wind up laying
Well,
off,
again,
and
until
then
we have a
bring
better
them back.
sense of enrollment, we need to be prepared for numbers that, until we actually know how many students we're going to get, for example. And we know right now that we have declined significantly, both at Eureka High and Zane, unfortunately, just this year. We've declined by, 50-plus students.
So
Now, is it true that there's no longer a May?
This coming year, there will not be the August layoff cycle.
August layoff?
Correct.
Okay,
Which-
people,
Okay.
there's a temptation to micromanage here, which we need to get away from.
Yeah.
And
That's not what
and we're not going to be
trying to
talking
do.
about specific individuals, that'll be
Right.
the staff. We're not talking about specific classes in the master schedule, although we have let them know about our concerns, and then it will come back to us for a final vote before anything's approved on the master schedule.
And I think we need to have an agenda item at some future board meeting so that we can get a better grip on what electives we offer,
Right.
what the board
Right.
thinks, because this has come up before, and we asked for an agenda item. It just, I think it kind of fell between the cracks, but that we were concerned about some of the elective offerings, and, it's a big draw for our schools to have.
Right. And what I recall, we've done it twice, usually in the spring and then one in the fall. And I remember one time in particular, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago,
I missed
the
that.
rumor had been, the rumor had been that we were going to eliminate art at Zane, and that was unfounded. And once we were able to show the master schedule, it had been reduced but not eliminated. And so,
So why don't we just put
Okay.
something on the agenda in May about the electives and
Okay.
what we offer and numbers.
Or as
Okay.
soon as possible.
And so I've heard 3 votes to accept this cut. Number 15, school counselors. So you're talking about,
and again, this is in somewhat response to being asked, exactly what our counseling program currently constitutes, and so,
Well, it should be combined with number 18 as well, right?
yes.
the conversation, yes.
Because they're related, guidance techs and the counselors.
They're somewhat related, yes.
And the 4 counselors here, and then the way that I look at it, there's 1 FTE here, so we're talking about going down to 3 counselors. And that's for the whole schools.
It's for Eureka
That's-
High and Zane. It would
And
be
Zane.
secondary.
Okay.
What
So
support
what-
does Zoe Barnum have?
Zoe Barnum currently has a guidance tech.
Okay, I want to make a little speech about this, because as the principal of Zoe for 9 years, of the students that we received that had been abused, and receiving those students, as far as counseling services go, actually counseling, not
Right.
scheduling, they're more in need than any other place in our district. And I have a real place in my heart for providing those kids to keep them in school with specific counseling services, much more so than Eureka High School. Eureka High School, 3 counselors for 1,000 students leaves very little time for actual counseling. It's more in terms of the guidance tech realm to accomplish the job that's put in front of them. And so I have a little different look at the needs than what we're doing currently.
What exactly if we cut out 4 FTE counselors?
That's not our recommendation. What we didn't.
That's what
no.
we have.
That's what we currently have. We were trying to offer a perspective, and then we offered what it would look like if there were 1 less, if there were 1.5 less, or if there were 2 less.
Oh, okay, so okay, and that's of counselors.
Right.
And just for my 2 cents worth, I'm a no on this because I have had numerous conversations. I've watched at the high school. They don't have enough counselors as it is. The same thing with the guidance techs. Just go out there on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th day of school while people are still trying to get their schedule straightened out. As far as the guidance techs go, we've dropped. I wish I had time to do the comparisons because I meant to look up, where we were, where we started at, and what we're down to now. I might consider revisiting this when we get through the rest of the list, but otherwise I'm a no.
Me too.
So it's
I see this as an area of non-required services. Okay, let me finish before you jump me on. We have required services that we have to provide. I want to bring in Zane into this. Zane is currently less than 600 enrollment.
A little over 6, I believe.
Right now, we're at about 617, or 612.
Okay, 600. We have elementary schools over 500, is that correct?
Correct. We have 1.
At an elementary school, we have a principal.
Correct. And
At
right now,
Zane, we have a principal, an assistant principal, a counselor, and either,
Part-time psychiatrist, psychologist.
we have a
Psychologist.
.8 school psychologist.
and so I've been the principal of both. I understand the needs at junior high schools are more significant in some ways, but our infrastructure isn't commensurate with the enrollment populations at the different sites. And I have a real question about that.
And we need to add counselors to the elementary schools.
Yeah, we need to add a lot of stuff, but we're trying to figure out what to.
Well, and maybe we need to just restructure a little bit and who's where.
Well, but again, our job is to figure out $2 million in cuts.
Understand that, but
to go from 7.4 counselors and psychologists, and here the recommendation is 1.5. To go from 7.4 to 5.9 is not something we want to do. I think it's something that we can work around, and we need to come up with the $2 million in cuts.
You need to find.
I hate to agree with you so often, but we have to do something.
And I'm doing stuff. Do you see these little nasty check marks I have? I'm not, just sitting here going, no, 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 no. And, okay.
So I'm not real clear on what it is that we're doing
Well, between
here.
15 and 18, we have the counselors and the guidance techs and the psychologists. The, what?
And we have another 1.5 guidance techs paid for out of categorical funds as well.
Well, this includes, the numbers of these include all.
This is general fund.
It does not include the elementary guidance techs because they're categorically funded. They're on the categorically funded page.
Different page.
So these counselors and guidance techs are just for Zane and the high school that we're looking at in
Zoe.
here? And Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, yeah, I have a really hard time with this one, too.
They're all hard.
I know. Can we move to the next one and come back?
Oh, good. Nurse reduction.
Did you want my 2 cents on that, John? Ian said I'm a nurse.
I thought you were going to volunteer at this point.
I could give about 10% on not having the availability of a nurse being a teacher.
So, you have down here a half a FTE and a 1 FTE. How many nurses do we have currently?
2 point
Well, we have actually.
something.
We have 2.5 regular positions and a half-time temporary. So we actually have 3 positions available to be filled. 2.5 regular, 1 is, and a half is temporary.
And we have operated with 2, but it is very lean.
But see, the thing that and I don't mean, maybe we're not supposed to be comparing, but I look at this and this saves $65,000. And we're spending $68,000 on pizza. I mean, to me, I'd rather get rid of pizza.
Well, you have,
Now, are you
I
keeping
understand,
kids
on
in
the
school
surface,
that
that's what
pizza?
it looks like,
You
but the
know?
fact is, for every kid that eats pizza, you get paid.
And
So
you also
although
have kids in school.
so it isn't actually $68,000 on pizza.
Well, that's what she said, the pizza bill was.
It actually is $68,000 in pizza, but what Wendy's saying is it generates income and keeps the kids on. It affects us in 2 different ways. It affects us in the ADA and kids on site, and our reimbursement rates for every meal that we serve, which.
So we
generates-
lose ADA if a kid goes to Burger King for lunch?
Excuse me?
We lose ADA if the kid leaves for lunch?
If they don't come back for 5th period.
I meant reimbursement
Oh,
for it.
okay.
But then it also boosts my entitlement, my spending dollar for purchasing food for the.
More kids should be.
So what do you get reimbursed for a school lunch for a high school student?
And I should probably have you come to the mic so it can get recorded. I'm sorry.
I believe it's $2.27. Paul, correct me.
Don't say, you have to say that again when you're up here.
I believe it's $2.27.
So if you get reimbursed $2.27, and the kid eats the pizza, that makes the district $2.27. But if he chooses not to eat because there's no pizza, then you lose $2.27. And the cost of the pizza is less. What was it, $1 something?
It's about $1.25, 29.
So you're not
For the
making
cost.
as much on pizza, but you're not actually losing any money if
Which,
they eat the pizza. And
Pizza
they're on-
or no pizza, we're talking about nurses here. Let's get back to nurses.
Good point.
She just keeps using that as a reference, and it's not actually $68,000, because it's not like you can go say, okay, well,
Right.
let's just eliminate pizza and keep the nurse. Because it doesn't actually
Right.
work.
If we have 2.
I get it.
Can I know?
Thank you.
Can you tell us how many, how much time, how much nursing time does each elementary school get? Do they get it according to the number of students? Do they get like 1 day a week, a half a day a week? Or do they work in teams where when they have to do the hearing tests, if they still are doing those, why they work together and, 2 or 3 of them go to a school, a couple of them go to school and do that?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Okay.
And do they eat
Under,
pizza?
I don't think they like pizza,
Time to go home.
but under a normal year, let's say, we would have 2 full-time nurses and a half-time nurse. In the recent years, we had the half-time nurse at Eureka High School. We had a full-time nurse serving Zane and covering at the high school periodically and covering at the elementary periodically. We had a full-time nurse that covered the elementary. They worked together to divide up the schools in different ways from year to year. At the current time, we have one of our nurses out on long-term disability, or not disability, a medical leave. And so we are filling that position with a couple of limited term positions. So at the current time, we have one of our temporary people serving the elementary. We have one nurse, actually the other is just 2 days a week serving the elementary. And we have a full-time nurse serving Zane and a full-time nurse serving Eureka High. And we have another part-time person 2 days a week who is handling the caseload for doing assessments for IEP meetings. So it varies from year to year in terms of the coverage, but
May I interrupt?
Yes.
With a question? We have a full-time nurse at Zane currently?
Yes.
She's there 5 days a week for
And-
the whole school day.
Yes, and she also, as you indicated, Fran, she performs the coordination for the screenings that are required for the elementary children and the junior high children.
Well, and then also it's my understanding now that if you have a child who's diabetic and has to have shots or something, the nurse has to give them. Nobody else can give them. So that nurse has to, at least I know when Nurse Rosie was there, she was coming to Washington a couple of different times from another school to give a student who needed insulin or something
Well,
a shot.
And if you're
'Cause nobody
speaking
else
of
can do it.
insulin, yes, it's a nurse that would have to assist. But let me make that correction about the middle school nurse. She's there 4 days a week, the person that we have there.
And then we have one nurse for 4 elementary schools?
And she works 2 days a week. The
Yeah, that's the.
Right, 2 days a week, and
Are there a lot of sick kids at
Wait. How often is a nurse on Alice Burney's campus? For how many hours and how many days?
No, actually, the situation with our nursing services right now, we really feel the loss of the person who's on medical leave, a very experienced, highly qualified person, and we are limited with our ability to fill that position. We have 2 part-time individuals who are only able to work a small amount of time. And so we're trying to figure out how best to deploy those nurses. And one of them who's very experienced, we're assigning her to only do the IEP-related health screenings and reports. The other one is working very hard to update our records so that all of the staff at the elementary level are very aware of the health needs and health concerns of all the children at the school, because we don't want to be caught unawares of students' health needs. And then, of course, we do have a full-time nurse at Eureka High. She also covers, by the way, Zoe Barnum, our high school nurse. She goes back and forth between Eureka High and Zoe Barnum.
So, if part of the issue is a staffing problem because we don't have the ideal staff in place, what are we budgeted for? And for what we are budgeted for, what would that translate to the sites? Not what we have currently because of issues, medical leave, et cetera. So if what we've budgeted for would be 2 full-time nurses, where would they be and how many days a week, ideally?
What we're really budgeted for is 2.5.
Right.
Okay. The additional half-time is so that we could actually hire someone. We advertised for quite a while a half-time position, and we could not fill that half-time position. And so we finally found a person who was willing to work half-time probationary, half-time temporary. We were able to get an individual to fill that vacancy. But to answer your question, I believe that 2.5 would adequately meet the needs of all of the schools deployed. I couldn't answer that exactly now, how many days to be assigned to elementary, how many days to be assigned to the middle school.
With the 2.5, would that be a reduction of 1?
The 2.5 would be a reduction of 0.5 from the current budget.
A half, so it would be
We're-
half of 32.
In the budget that we
It
built,
would be 32.
this goes back to Wendy's question at the very beginning. In the budget that we built, we're 2.5 nurses. In order to find an individual, we added half-time temporary. So we're paying a little bit more than we had budgeted for in the nursing department so that we could find that third individual.
So is this asking us to reduce from 2.5 to either 2 or 1.5? Is that what this is showing us?
We're simply displaying
Yes.
the numbers, and it's up to the board to make that choice of
Yeah, but that's what
reduction.
but we're starting with 2.5, and so this would be a reduction down to 2 or a reduction down to 1.5.
Yes.
But you're saying that what you need is 2.5. That's what you just.
That's right.
Okay.
32.5.
But Rich, aren't we saying that we have, with the half temporary, 3 right now?
Right.
So a half reduction would put us to 2.5.
Right.
A full would put us to 2.
Okay, so that's.
Okay, so that would be the 65.
Correct.
And Wendy never got her question answered. And how we used to do our scheduling when we had a little bit more money is we would assign them to each of our schools on a regular schedule. And instead of looking at it that way now, we look at it as what are the mandates we have to accomplish? Where are the medically fragile kids? Where do we have emergencies that we need to know where all the nurses are to prepare so everybody knows in an emergency where to find them. So we don't slice it quite that way. It's more lateral in accomplishing what are the mandates and being prepared for the emergency.
So we really need to do at least the 0.5. We're falling way below the 2 million that we need.
I would say the 1.
1 would be better.
So that's 65?
Yes.
Are you going to be able to get all of the? Are you going to be able to get the work done with that? I mean, there's mandates and things that have to be done.
I think to answer that question, we would have to look back at all the conversation tonight. We're asking people to keep doing what we need to do with less. My answer wouldn't be any different, but everybody else would give you the same answer.
Or doing more.
Or doing more with less.
Can you volunteer in a school? I could.
That would be no. No.
That
would be no.
Okay.
Not at that level. If you want to come read to a kindergartner, we'll think about it.
So what's the consensus of the board?
I am willing to do the 32.5, but I wouldn't be willing to do the 65. And I'm not happy with 32.5.
Wendy?
I agree with Fran.
I agree.
32.5.
Okay.
3.
All right.
We got 3 votes. 32.5. 1.5. Number
17.
17, classified.
And again, this is a situation where we are really trying to look at attrition through, ideally through retirements and/or people moving on to other things, and trying to work at not filling some of those positions to a equivalent of 3.0. Does that mean that nobody would receive layoffs? No, there probably would, because we need some flexibility. But at least our goal would be to not fill positions that from retirements and
I
things
think
like that.
we have to do this.
I think we have to, because I said no too many times in a row. So, but I am seriously concerned about monitors. We seriously don't have enough monitors as it is, and I don't know how to differentiate between all of the other things, and I don't know, I won't micromanage that situation and say, yes, except don't touch monitors, but at the same time, I want to voice my concerns that we're seriously understaffed with monitors at our schools.
What I can say, the conversations that are occurring is to looking as vacancies have come up this year, looking at whether or not the work has gone away because we're declining enrollment. Sometimes it has, or whether it's like we've said before, can people truly do it and pick up more? And with monitors, that would be a very hard conversation right now.
I am not having it.
Can we write down the 148 and move on?
I think, I just.
Consensus on the 148?
No.
I'll say yes.
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 Okay, yes. Do something.
Number 19, school site, clerical positions, 4.0.
Guidance techs we're coming back to because they were part of 15, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
kind of tied together.
Yeah, so we tied those together. So, and again, it really is looking at, and I think Hank has kind of alluded to it, we need to look at our staffing ratios at the secondary sites. Some of those staffing ratios haven't been adjusted for a number of years. So it really would be looking at how many, what's our staffing ratio per pupil, and looking at making reductions based on that.
Is that in regards to 18? Is that what you were talking about?
No,
19.
19? Oh, okay.
How else are clerical positions funded if not out of district monies?
Well, that's the primary funding source, because you can't, with the whole categorical funding, there's some, clerical? Depends on what they're doing. If they're working specifically with students doing something, we've been able to sometimes fund part of their position with categorical, but not all of it. Well, I'm not sure if that answered your question. Special ed, for example, comes in as a categorical fund, but we have more cost to special ed than we get in categorical funds, so some of them end up being general funds as well.
So when you say secondary clerical positions, how many roughly do we have today?
I can think of, I'm counting in my head, I think 8 or 9 at the high school, and then maybe 5 at Zane or something like that. What, 6 at Zane?
The library clerk.
Okay, so 5.
4 3/4.
Yeah.
I think you're real close on high school.
Yeah.
5, and so altogether you're saying how many?
Well, I think there's something like 9, off the top of my head, at the high school, and then 4, almost 5 at the middle school, so you're looking at 14.
So that's a rough cut, but I don't see any other choice.
That has to get in line with everybody else's.
It truly is adjusting it based on the student enrollment. We have not made those kinds of adjustments at the secondary level as we have at the elementaries.
I'll say yes to that one.
Yep.
Okay.
And 5 votes. Number 20, district office clerical, recommending 1.5. The same thought.
How are you guys doing?
So the same thought applies there for me. It's rough, but got to do it.
So you're saying, what, 80,000?
60.
Saying
So-
60, or are
So-
you saying 40?
1.5, 60.
Educational Services now has 3 staff members, and you're considering reducing that by 1/3.
No, it's not aligned. It's just telling you how many staff are in those 2 departments, and then looking at what the difference between, looking at 1, 1.5, or 2. So that 1 could come out of either place. It's not designating a
see.
particular department, other than overall,
Okay, I'm
within
sorry.
those departments, we would look at reductions.
So if we did the 1.5 and 1 position is currently unfilled, then you would really only be reducing by 1/2 because you could just not fill that position?
That would be our intent.
Okay,
I'd go for that.
I'll go for that.
Okay.
Only gonna be a half position.
Number 20 is
Well, but it truly is a 1.5
Because you're not
reduction in
filling it.
terms of the
Correct.
overall.
But
That
it's-
would- that's
it's
currently
only one
budgeted.
number?
It's
I'm
currently
thinking of
budgeted.
people, I
Yeah,
guess.
that
It
would
be
be
a half of a
what I'm
person.
thinking.
This one is 40, this one is 60, and this one is 80, so is it a combination of these 3?
It's a
or
1.5.
just-
No. We had the option of 1, saving 40, 2, saving
Oh,
80. And they're
okay.
recommending
60.
1.5, saving 60.
I see.
Okay, number 21, certificated management work, fewer calendar days.
Okay, I'm absolutely opposed to this, and I'll tell you why. What we should say that we're going to cut their pay, because none of these people can get the work done in the time allotted now. I find people working on Saturdays and Sundays, and so this is a pay cut. And if we're going into pay cuts, then we need to look at it for everybody. And I feel strongly about this.
And any of the other fewer working days is a negotiated item which we can't discuss.
I understand that.
Right.
But if we're talking about pay cuts, which is what this is, because it is not, the work cannot be done in fewer days.
How
We're
much are
expecting
we-
them to do.
And how much are we asking, how many days by?
We're cutting them by 5 days.
Has anybody got a calculator? Where are we?
Yeah.
Where have we?
We're way short.
Okay. We're at
1.502.
We're at 1.5.
1.502.
We're not way short.
We're coming to the end and we're 500,000
What,
short.
would this be
We haven't
something
done
that,
anything with counselors yet.
I mean, we could certainly decrease the
includes
number
the
of days.
No, it doesn't,
Why doesn't it?
because we decided to put it off rather
What,
than discuss it.
what he's saying is they're gonna work that number of days anyway, because they're working more than they're actually getting paid for as it is, so basically it's, in effect, it's a pay cut.
Yeah.
This is probably an item we should move to closed session.
Okay.
Yeah. Go back to it.
Both of them, certificated management and classified management?
All right. We're not going to address it tonight. We'll address it in closed session.
And that was the next one also?
Yes.
22 also?
Yes.
Okay.
23, home and hospital.
And, you know, what, this one's a little bit, like I said, harder because we have certain guarantees of staffing that we have, and yet we don't always have kids necessarily. So it's just really looking at, though, not going over what we already are contracted to provide, and trying to stick within that. But it may mean, you know, we have tried before and we've talked about it before, and I think we've moved away from it a little bit. Where with home and hospital, we used to do some small groups, and that way it was a more efficient delivery model. I know the kids that have been coming into home and hospital have made that more challenging to try to do, but certainly I would think that before we add staff, we need to look at, can we group?
So I'm kind of confused as to what you're saying here. I mean, the impact to the general fund is 61. Are you saying that there's no real place to cut here, or are you saying there is? And if you're saying there is, how much?
It's kind of a,
Are you saying
maybe.
61,607?
On this one, I think, and unfortunately Sherry's not here and we didn't have a chance to completely go through this. So I would say at this point, all this is saying is that this is truly the impact of the general fund. Is there ability to make reductions here or not? I don't know that we know that at this point.
And this is an essential program. It's not like we can just eliminate this program.
Correct.
So
Right. I don't think
there's
we're
really-
talking about eliminating it, just reducing it.
and we also talked about the fact that if we reduced or eliminated the not CalWorks,
CalSafe.
that those students could be picked up by the home and hospital program.
They could. Generally, they go into Center for Independent Study because they have a less, you know, home and hospital is typically for medical, and they might for a brief period of time with
So for
having a baby,
tonight,
but not,
It sounds like we don't have a lot to talk about in this section.
probably not.
Okay.
Okay, item number 24.
That's a 0.
And that's a 0, so.
We can all go along with that.
These, in part, these were questions that came up by the board, so we were bringing back that information.
Item number 25, secondary certificated management position. I'm not sure what the dean of students who that would replace.
Well, we do have an opening right now, and it would replace an assistant principal position.
And they don't get paid, deans don't, those students do.
They don't work as many days, and they don't work the same number of hours.
Is at Eureka High?
Correct.
And you could, a dean would be able to do the job?
Well, I think, like Hank said, you know, that's that same, Rich has said, you know, it's just really doing more work with less amount of time, but.
If somebody wants to get into the insanity of being in the management, this would be a starting point.
Correct. And it, go ahead.
So I
It
would
wouldn't
vote
work
aye.
at Elementary, it wouldn't work at the middle school, would it?
Again, it's an opportunity to restructure based on an opening that we have.
So instead of,
so that's at the high school.
It's at the high school.
But it could
also apply.
It could also apply, yes.
What I'm asking.
Yes, it
I
could.
say yes.
I'll say yes to that.
And then revisit it if nobody wants that position.
Okay, so where are we now?
So now we need to go back to the things that we skipped.
We got two more teachers.
Yeah, but those are not general fund.
1,509,000 is the sum of the cuts and other savings.
1.59.
1.5.
Oh, not bad. We got to start.
09, did you say?
1,509,000 and some change.
Okay.
I want to talk about the instructional coach, though.
Okay.
It was stated, and I personally have an issue with it, so I don't know about new board members that weren't part of the process, but.
What are you talking about, Wendy? Where are you?
It's on page
The next
5.
page.
Categorical.
Oh, we're
Number
moving on
6,
categorical.
instructional
For now,
coach.
we'll have to come back, but yes.
This was brought to the board as a created position, a position that we did not have, that we as a board agreed to create based on needs of training leaders to be leaders, to train teachers, in theory. Greg and I went to this was at the California School Board Association conference, and we both took this workshop, and it was exciting stuff. And this instructional coaching model, they had the presenters, and that's where my understanding of how the idea started from. And as he presented it to the board, it sounded like a really, really good idea. But the model that we were looking at, the instructional coaches were teachers on special assignment. When he came to the board and said, we need an instructional coach, this is the plan, this is the idea, the instructional coach is going to teach, I guess, starting with principals, and he even talked about an umbrella, where then the principals would be able to teach teachers this model of helping teachers become better teachers. And we approved the position. After we approved the position is when the salary for the position was presented, which as a board, we didn't have a say-so, because that's micromanaging. And I had lengthy conversations with people about whether or not the board was in charge of deciding where this position was placed on the salary schedule. So we went from talking, and my understanding was talking about something that was paid at slightly above a teacher's salary, and we went from that to a position that was paid at an administrative salary, higher than first-year principals. And I would never have voted for the position in the first place if that was something that was understood. So now we have an instructional coach at $113,000 a year, which is the equivalent of step 2 on the principal salary schedule.
Well,
First
Okay,
of all,
well-
it's salaries and benefits in there as well, so it's not just a salary.
I'm not sure how the numbers all wash out, but we're talking about somewhere close to a principal's.
and I do remember quite a bit of dialogue, and certainly approving the job description came to the board several different times, and the job description as presented was for certificate of management, and it did indicate the number of days and everything else. I also know that in terms of being a PI district, and in particular I think PI 3 is part of our requirements is to have instructional coaching. And so it was in essence also to meet a requirement that we have as a district and program improvement.
Which a teacher on special assignment would have fulfilled. Or numbers of teachers on special assignment. We could have had 3, 4 coaches that were teachers on special assignment and more closer to a $65,000 price tag.
Well,
just to follow up with what Leanne said, I would need to jump in here and ask that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater. As a district in program improvement and with 3 of our schools in program improvement, we really do need an instructional coach. In fact, we need probably 3 or 4. But that's a different kind of conversation, Wendy, than the one that you were bringing up. I wouldn't know how to weigh in on the concern that you were expressing. other than the fact that I would hope that whatever the board decides with this matter, that you still give our administration and our teacher leaders the flexibility to hire instructional coaches to support teachers improving their instruction in the classroom. That's a real critical piece for school improvement, something that our local educational agency plan will be. In fact, I'm working on, as you know, currently, that we're probably going to be writing positions into that plan, at least one, possibly two, which would be totally categorically funded. But again, like I said, that's a completely different discussion than the concern that Wendy was mentioning.
So if instructional coach is a requirement at PI, then I don't have a problem with the salary, because you're not comparing 113 to 65. That 65 teacher has another 12 to 15,000 of benefits, and there's probably some supplies and things in there. So you're comparing 113 to maybe 80. But this has to be a way above average person, so I don't want to micromanage and determine that there's going to be a pay cut in this one specific position, which is that important.
I agree with, I'm sorry, but I agree with Wendy. I think it should be a teacher rather than an administrator. And it could be even two teachers rather than administrators, an administrator.
Well, I think at this point we have this instructional coach in place, and but I think for the future, because I know as part of the curriculum committee, that was one of the first meeting I went to. We did all this brainstorming in groups and looking at the new core standards, and the main thing that the teachers in that group expressed that they wanted was more instructional coaches to meet some of the goals that we need to do for program improvement and for the new core curriculum, the new standards. So I think going forward, we need to look maybe at a different way of the new coaches that we're bringing on, be teachers or do something different maybe looking forward, but I don't see how we can do something to this existing person.
And
Can I ask a point of clarification? On this thing, this sheet, okay, it's the Eureka City Schools fiscal stability plan, but it's categorical funds.
Correct.
Now, does this apply to our general fund problems and the budget and the second interim?
$2 million.
Are we just getting way off base here, or?
I'd like to go ahead and address that. And I think this subject came up at one of the other board meetings, and I tried to be very careful with my language for a reason. We, I believe, reduced or eliminated library techs a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the school board made a very deliberate decision to eliminate those positions, declaring that we really didn't need the positions because we had to balance the budget. At a later date, a separate decision was made which involved the school site principals and their categorical fund budgets to use categorical money to hire the library techs. Those two decisions were separated in time, and they were separated in action. And it's very important to keep those two types of decisions separate so that we do not use our categorical money to supplant the general fund.
And that's, okay, I understand that. But when we're talking about this sheet that's in front of us, does this impact the general fund, or is this instructional coach paid for through categorical programs?
The instructional coach, for the most part, is paid for through categorical programs. Can there be an impact to the general fund indirectly? I think that there probably could.
Indirectly, but
So,
not
because
in
money
a
comes
current
out of the
time
general fund that could be used for categorical programs. Wait, I said that exactly backwards. Even though this particular thing is funded through categorical funds, then if this particular thing didn't exist, you may have money that no longer has to be pulled out of the general fund. Not this money. Does that make sense?
So why are these in
My
front of
concern
us?
gets into, okay, each
Hitting the
site
target.
has a site plan, correct? Is this position is it in the individual site's site plan, and is it being paid for through site council approved monies?
Not at this time, no.
Originally it was, wasn't it? Because they had the first instructional coaches I remember was at Zane.
It was, that was
Georgianne's
a,
making some head
I
nods.
just think, we
Could you
don't
come
have
up
it.
so we
I'm
can
loud enough,
record
they
it?
can hear me.
but not be recorded.
I'm sorry.
Have to be recorded. You have to be on TV too.
I mean, I've got to get the supplement
And while
and
she's coming up-
supplant picture, but we also have to realize if this is coming out of general fund versus if it's coming out of the site, and I don't know how this impacts our discussion tonight.
Well, we do know that, because Paul and I were looking at this budget and looking at the funding of this just a couple of days ago. Part of the instructional coaches is paid out of District Title I. Part of the instructional coach is paid out of District Title III. And a small portion is paid out of Zane Title I, and a small portion out of
Alice Burney and
Alice Burney
Lafayette.
and Lafayette Title I. Does that account for the 100%?
I believe so.
Okay, so
It's about 50-50, right?
it's about that. So it's all categorically funded. One of the things that we have been advising the principals to do at this point in time, because we have asked them to look at their site categorical budgets. We have asked them to have these conversations with site councils when they meet with them in the coming couple of months to make reductions at their school sites because the fiscal future is not real certain. And if they can make reductions at their school site, it would give them flexibility. And having flexibility going into next year would be very valuable for them to have. So we've advised them to try to cut back. But back to the issue of program improvement and the district plan for improvement, which we are required to submit to the state, and the state will be monitoring our performance this coming year. As we write into our school plan, one or possibly two positions, our district plan, as we write in one or two, possibly two instructional coach positions, what that is in effect saying, it's giving direction to the entire district and giving direction to the school sites, so that we look at categorical funds that the school sites have and that the district has as one large source of revenue.
Okay, in my discussions with Paul this morning, trying to understand some of this, part of it was we had an excess of Title I funds that's building up that needs to be dealt with.
We have a minimum level of carryover that we can move from 11-12 to 12-13, about $200,000, correct? I'm sorry, did I say a minimum? A maximum.
Maximum.
A
That's the
maximum.
most we can carry.
Okay. Which gets back to that site plan, and
At this point, to answer your question, Hank, in the Alice Burney site plan, and I can only speak for that, we do not have an instructional coach written into that plan. We've been asked to contribute some money to the thing, to the current instructional coach as I see it, and that has not been yet taken to the site council and approved. I intend to do that. But Rich has been Dr. Lentz has been very careful and very instructive to us to always qualify every one of our expenditures by tying it to a site plan goal and any accompanying action plans. And frankly, neither he nor Paul will okay anything that does not have that. So at this point, we don't have that in our plan, if that answers your question, at the site level.
For the purposes of tonight and getting to that $2 million, does this mean anything? And like if we circle that 228 and say, okay, we'll take that, does that even add to that 1.5 million? Well, then why are we?
It doesn't.
Then let's move on.
It doesn't. Sorry.
Okay, so moving on.
Yeah, thanks.
I asked that quite some time back, maybe didn't put it right.
Should we
So we need to go back and
go back
revisit.
to,
So what about the capital items? That doesn't have anything to do with tonight either? I have the
we could,
properties?
we
No?
could decide to spend it on general fund, which would be a huge mistake.
So we're gonna go back to where we were.
I would be
first?
terribly opposed to using that for general fund expenditures.
Yes. So would I.
Okay.
If I can just put my 2 cents in very quickly, though. The budget for 12-13 does not contain a lot of additional money for premises. So I just want to point out that that is a pressure, an additional pressure that we may face in 12-13, depending on the different projects that we decide to take on. So I'll leave it at that. I would say that this could help us.
I.e., the roof over
The roof over at the gym.
Okay, over the pool.
Over the pool, thank you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The siding at Lafayette, on a number of their buildings at Lafayette has been way moved up to the top of our list. Yes, those type of items.
And what about the boys' locker room?
Yes.
So those are one-time expenditures, which would be appropriate for one-time monies from the sale of property.
Absolutely.
But those one-time expenditures are not built into your budget and not part of the 2.5 million.
That's correct.
That we're looking at
That's
tonight.
correct.
So those are discussions for another time.
But actually, if we went
So-
back and looked at, I'm really not, I wish Dan were here to talk about the transportation, because I still have a little problem with this. But if we added in what he has down as the net encroachment, the 166,000, we'd have over 2 million right there.
Well, I remind you, he didn't say that. He
No.
didn't put that number in. That's
Paul
the-
did.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
That's the minimum amount that we,
So could we put in a number that we
That's what
will
I'm-
ask
But I'd rather
Dan
have
to
Dan to be
achieve?
here.
Okay, Dan's not here, so
Well,
we
I
need to
think,
do something tonight. So could we maybe come up with a number of,
let's tell him he's gotta cut 25,000 out
50,000.
of his budget.
And then bring back to the board what that would look like, and then
right,
it could affect what you do after that point.
We're at 1.5, correct?
Yes.
1.509.
We have two sections.
so let's give Dan a goal.
So we're gonna do,
Give him 100,000 to work on.
So one thing, and I know we said we weren't going into the capital items, but I just have a question, because I mentioned this to Paul this morning when I talked to him, is that with the Lincoln remodel, with, if we're scaling back on adult education, and I think there was like 94 students in Zoe, there was the student, I mean, how big, what do we have to, how much big
So those
of a
prints are
remodel
being
do we have
drawn
to
up
do?
now, and they.
But I mean, do we need to do such a big plan if we don't have, we don't have that many
We've
students?
scaled it back. It was over 3 million, and now we're going just to what's necessary to get the school operating, which is what the 1.9 million.
To save the building and make it operational.
Yeah, it's not really the number of students.
And the
it's-
main building is what we're talking about. We're not talking about others.
When the combination of Zoe and adult, and the old Humboldt Bay, there's ideas of expanding the Zoe program later. So the 1.9 is already a big scale back of what we were going to have before.
And it really kind of doesn't apply because whether there's one student in the classroom or 50 students in the classroom, the broken window has to be replaced. So when you're talking about the facility itself, the roof has to be fixed or the electrical has to be upgraded. So it isn't a matter of the more students, the more you have to do.
And a lot of
minimally.
that's going to be for ADA bathrooms too.
Well, I guess I was just kind of thinking out loud, if we aren't serving that many students, do we need to redo a whole another campus?
We have to
Not
save
lose
that
that.
building.
This is the question school boards were talking about 20 or 30 years ago about Jacobs, and they decided not to, and now we have to
There it
tear
sits.
Jacobs down because it wasn't maintained properly.
It is more about saving the building and making sure that the building stays within Eureka City Schools than whatever program we choose to
That's
put
right,
there.
that we need it for.
It's usable.
Okay, let's move on.
So what did you say you were doing with transportation, giving him, taking 66? Even 100, or what did you said?
I think maybe 100's way too high.
Yep.
I mean, we're not going to eliminate in-city busing.
I understand that, so what I'm saying is, so we're gonna take 50 out of the 166 and make it 116?
No, I would suggest
We asked him to trim 50,000.
Trim.
What if we just,
So if we trimmed 50, that would make it 160.
well, he has down
No.
here, that number doesn't really mean anything, Fran, because that was something that, I think there, in the notes part, it says reduce the spending down to 95% of the total appropriation, which is what we have to have it. What does it look like if we do that? That looks like
Well,
way
not-
too much, or?
the
Yeah.
95% is the 166,000.
That
cuts. And then
So-
he was talking earlier, the
Yeah.
166 cuts.
Would
Some of the
really.
possibilities were eliminating in-city
Yeah.
busing
We're not
and
gonna do that.
And we're not gonna leave the kids,
Only morning
only
busing.
bus in the
No, we're not
morning and
doing
then.
that either.
I think, yeah, some of that was to save quite a bit more money.
The savings on both those two approaches were $214,000, so it overshoots the mark a little bit. But I think that Dan probably looks at things on a per route basis or something along those lines. So to say, maybe 76,000, something like that rings a bell to me, that he was talking, a
Per
single
route?
route is a particular number. Maybe it was 72,000. I'll get to that number sooner or later, but, yeah, so, there's no such thing as a half a route. So if 70,000 is a route, you can't do a 35,000 by cutting it in half or something along those lines.
I don't think we have enough information
I
to
don't think
even
we-
ask
that's
him to
what
cut
I'm saying.
50,000. What would that look like? I mean,
I think we should leave it alone and ask Dan to come back with a specific
what can you do,
possible
Dan?
cut.
what's our next board meeting?
We had
And nurses,
15, 18,
counselors, and
No, what's our
guidance.
next board meeting date?
March 7th.
March 7th.
So could he come back at that time, and would we still have time to do this?
Not to put into the second interim.
Okay, so we need a
You have to
figure put
approve
into
the,
second interim.
right, we have to approve the second interim March,
And
at that
that's-
March meeting, as well as
That's
the
my
final.
purpose of
March 14th, but, yeah. I
Oh.
mean, basically, tomorrow,
So that's my purpose of putting a goal and putting that in there
Right.
for him to come back
So
later.
even putting it out to March 14th, you still have to get it into the county by,
soon, really soon,
before the next board meeting, basically.
before the 7th.
So let's put it in a number and then leave it up to him to come back. And we'll have to adjust it later if we have to.
Then let's make it the 50.
All right, 50,000.
Did we have any questions about home and hospital? Because I think she came back to answer them and would like to go if we don't. I don't think we did, because there was no net impact. So
Right.
we just,
It was more information that had been requested by the board to staff, so staff brought it to the board.
Well, we have this number, 61,600. And is that a viable number for anything? I mean, what?
So I think the real question is, and Sherry, sorry, but what we have is, we see what the net numbers look like. Is there a way to reduce the financial impact on the general fund through the home and hospital program? And I don't know.
And you have to come to the mic.
Great. That's a tough one.
Currently, we offer home and hospital services to families
for up to 5 days a week. It's not in ed code, and the last time that I looked at with Leanne, that we have to service 5 days a week. So the one way we could change the impact would to have a teacher not see the same students for 1 hour, 5 separate days a week, and try to combine some of those hours. That would be a possible way to continue to have the services to the public, to our students through the home and hospital program, but kind of consolidate it a bit.
And is that what the $61,000 reflects? Is that consolidation?
No.
Not at
The
all.
61 is the
Because you asked me, could it change? So what it currently reflects is our teachers' our hourly wages, their drive mileage, and benefits.
Okay. How many students do you serve with home and hospital?
Currently, we have 15 to 18. It fluctuates because we serve students in a variety of capacities through home and hospital. We have students that we serve which we would call traditional. That would be somebody who had surgery, back surgery, or some type of a more traditional thing. And other times we serve some students that maybe it's more of a thing where they're working on medication, stabilizing at home, and it's hard for them to go and make it through a full school day. So those are the ways that we serve them the most. So your $88 are paid per student for what would be the requirement? 5 hours a week? Or is it 1 hour a day? Or what dictates whether or not you get this $88? I believe it's only for each day, each hour that the student is served. So we could serve more students for less hours, but I'm not sure that you don't get paid for each hour. That would be no. With Center for Independent Study, which is different, it's 1 hour a week, and you get that whole week's ADA for that. But with home and hospital, it's not. It's for the day you see the student, for the hour you see the student.
Okay. So
And
that's
how
why you're
much-
doing 5 days a week, because you're getting.
Correct. But if we wanted to keep the program and still have it as an option, it's not a mandatory program.
My question is, how many of those currently receiving service on home and hospital could be switched to contract independent study?
Well, because how could they?
Just because some of the students have the wherewithal to come.
Well, it's hard to explain because in some respects, like we serve parenting or pregnant, so some of those could really come on site. But if they have a doctor's note that they have to be bedridden, then some of those can be like reevaluated potentially. Transportation can sometimes be an issue for the younger ones, coming to us. I'm sorry.
So
It's complex.
It is.
So I don't think you can use the 61 as what it would save us. It's really more, it's harder to quantify. We could serve more students in home and hospital and save money by, like Sherry said, maybe having them see the teacher only 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week. And that way we wouldn't have to hire additional staff as our numbers grew. But it's
the
not.
revenue goes down.
Well, not if we had.
We'd still be providing the service to the students where they still wouldn't be able to attend traditional schools in the same respect.
All right. So it's hard to quantify.
It's a service that we're providing to our students.
Could an hourly home and hospital contact going out to that home do a contract independent study contract with the student? Does a CIS student have to come to school, or can we go to them?
CIS students need to come to our site.
we actually try to encourage our home and hospital students to come into our site, especially as they're getting to the end where they can transition back, because sometimes we use it as a transition plan. I don't know under Ed Code, to be honest, if we can go to the home under Center for Independent Study.
Financially, it'd make a lot more sense to have a one-day contact and take the work to the student.
1 day a week.
I mean, revenue, income versus cost.
I'd be happy to do more research on it and come back or email it to you.
Well, and I'm thinking of the pregnant minor that is at home.
Right.
They need to be able to maintain their workload. They do not need 5 days a week contact.
I believe that you're correct.
And so if there's a way to provide a contract independent study mechanism with the hourly contact person, this thing could actually turn around rather than be an expense.
It sounds like it.
Yep.
What I think that has to do more with ETA. I can't say what goes where when it comes to the hourly, the home and hospital versus CIS idea.
Well, and I think what she's referring to currently in our contract, we have 2 home and hospital teachers guaranteed a certain number of hours per year.
Right.
Now, there's no guarantee over that, so I think the idea is anything over that, is there a way to provide a more cost-saving system to still have the kids get schooling, but maybe it's
Right.
looking at more, though, after we reach whatever that limit is, we really look at CIS versus home and hospital.
Right. It sounds like maybe having a modified system to still provide services that is as fiscally prudent as possible, is what I'm hearing you say.
So Center for Independent Study, is it required that the student, in order to participate in that program, is it mandated that the student come to the site? Or
As
is that just
past
something
practice,
That's past practice. So,
to be honest.
And in part, what we've...
I think so as well.
Because in part, I remember having a discussion on, part of it has to do with safety.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right, we have agreements that they sign, and so there's a very strict agreement that contract that we create.
I remember discussing it quite some time ago, and
Mhm.
as I remember it, they have to come. They only have to come one day.
Right.
Isn't that 1 day for an hour or whatever it is?
Right, and we offer more. We offer tutoring and things like that, support.
We can't put a number down.
We can't put a number down. This is correct.
You can't put a number down, I'm sorry.
I would like you to proceed, though, with researching that to find out
Right.
if we could provide independent study through an hourly contact once a week.
In a home.
Mhm.
Okay, I will do that.
if we
Would
have
you like
two
it through
types
email?
of students that we are servicing, or 2 types of students, we have the student that cannot come to the school.
Yes.
And therefore requires somebody to go to them.
Mhm.
We have the student that cannot participate in regular classroom activities but can come to the school. We have this program. Are the two, can the two be developed into one, and would that generate any savings? Aside from contract issues?
Did you remember that one of the places that we send kids when we expel them is to
Independent study?
independent study?
That's
And
still
they're
different
not
than home and
allowed to
hospital.
Yeah.
On the site.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
these are questions maybe for another time.
So-
Right, further
And
further
let's move
exploration.
on with tonight's topic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we were back to busing, number 7, and I was talking about maybe putting a $50,000.
We all agree with it.
That's what I thought I heard. To ask Dan, what would it look like
Yeah.
with saving on the general fund 50,000?
So back to number 13. Maximizing, 13 first, maximizing class sizes.
I'm a no on that.
I'm a no on that.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
I'm a no.
Okay, so,
What is that going to do with your March 15th notices?
well, my recommendation is that we go ahead and give us some flexibility like we have in the past, because, you know, we're anticipating maybe in terms of FTE with declining enrollment. Obviously, we've seen a slight increase K-1, and we hope that trend continues, but what if we lose 100 kids at elementary? So
We still need the.
Yeah, we need that
notices
flexibility,
because
but
the county we're not coming up with enough dollars, and the county may reject it and tell us to
Correct.
come up with some more cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is one that is already in place for all purposes, but for the purposes of budgeting, that we have to include it.
Right. And I would say, as you know, if you look at our past,
I don't want this to happen.
well, and I would agree with everything pretty much on here. But what I can say is, as we've become clearer with our enrollment and the number of kids and in what grade levels, we've brought back staff as we've needed to staff those classrooms. But this just gives us that little bit of safety or a little bit of flexibility for if enrollment trends in particular change dramatically, or there's a shift in a particular grade level, we have some flexibility.
Even if we take all the recommendations for the counselors and the guidance techs, without this item, we failed to come up with $2 million. Y'all need to keep that in mind.
And I'm still, I mean, I think in your mind, the number is 2 million, and I think that we can present a fiscal stability plan at 1.5 and they would accept it. So that's why I said that I'm comfortable coming up with 1.5 million in cuts for tonight's meeting, for tonight's purposes. I can understand adding an extra 2 FTEs for the purpose of presenting that, and that's our intention, but not if it's connected to maximizing classroom or losing classroom. I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
If number 13 is attached to those 2 FTEs as a given, then I would have a problem with it. But if you just needed to say, well, we're also planning on eliminating a number of positions, here's the number and here it is on our budget, I could see doing that.
You can back up the number with this rationale.
Okay.
You have to have a rationale for the number.
Right. So we either would say, for example, 4, based on our assumption of declining enrollment, or 2 and 2, or I mean, it really, I think what Hank's saying is that you have to have a rationale for why this is in the plan.
Well, if
You
the
can't just
rationale is
throw
because you're going to put more
127,000 in
students in the
because.
classroom, then I'm not for that rationale.
Me either.
Okay, moving on. Number 15 and 18, counselors and techs.
Okay, wait, I'm not real clear on what we agreed to on that number.
Well,
three
three of
three
them,
no's.
3 said no.
But okay, but it's split apart. So did I hear that, but at least for the fiscal stability plan, we can put in 2 FTE based on declining enrollment?
Yeah, that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we
I'm
have
just,
one in there at all?
we have one now, and so what we're saying is to have us have some flexibility, because I do have concerns until the kids are actually here. We don't always know what number we're going to get.
I don't see that.
Well, more importantly, it makes the number of notices going out more appropriate.
I understand that, but I don't see it.
It's on the
under-
bottom
It's
of page
it's
2.
under 12. Well, it starts.
It's on the, right, but the declining enrollment one
Oh,
So-
okay.
is on, so I'm going to change that to 2. And that's,
So
I
we
thought that was
change
the
that
one
to
that
2, and
we
we take
couldn't-
out the maximizing class size is what it says.
Correct.
So we have 2, and that gets us to 120 right up here, right?
yes.
So we've added another 120.
2.
Okay, Mr. Calculator over there, where are we?
We're good. So we're
Should be
doing
1.679.
2 FTE.
1.680.
And that gives us, and that
You
gives
rounded,
us
or I rounded.
I added the
120.
120,800.
Yeah, 120,800.
Okay, so
Counselors, techs.
Well, I think we're on 14, right? Did we ever do anything
We
on
okayed
14?
that.
We okayed
Did we okay
14,
that one?
yes.
Yeah.
We're coming back to 15 and 18.
Okay.
I'm a no.
I'm a no on 15.
I'm a no.
Well, we can't just put a number down on that one. So it
Is that
fails
is
2
that
to 3.
Is that a March 15th issue?
Yes.
Don't like it.
Counselors and techs are really necessary, but it could be that if we don't cut there, then teachers might be losing their jobs.
Yes.
That's correct.
instead. So
We're
which
talking
would
But
you
school
rather have?
counselors,
Are not direct service
they.
in the classroom.
School counselors are not even.
Not with-
They're not certificate, I mean, they're not, they're with the
Yeah, the
administration.
But
The
they
two
are
don't-
part of March 15th.
I'm talking about the dollar.
Absolutely. So
Yes,
do
they are.
anybody with a credential has that ed code.
Okay.
Yeah.
they're not interchangeable. I mean, it has to come back to the board to eliminate
The final one
positions.
does anyway.
So whether it's,
They need
what
the
you just said is if we
flexibility.
don't take it here, we're gonna lose a teacher over there, not until it comes back to the board, you know.
If we have to cut X amount of dollars, if we don't cut it in this area, we have to cut it in another area.
Mm-hmm.
So
And if we don't
And-
have
Be aware.
the March 15th notices,
then we cannot go back and cut any counselors and techs, and you're putting them at a higher priority than other places.
I want to clarify the guidance techs are classified and that they don't have the March 14th, but the counselors do.
but we only have a .8 guidance tech.
Correct.
Yeah.
What are we at?
1.68.
I think that's plenty.
I think we can present that.
16790.
So
I'm not comfortable not giving them the flexibility necessary because I do not want to impact classrooms. And I understand what you're saying about the elementary class size. But if you don't give the notices, you set yourself up to impact those without any choice.
It's still not gonna come up.
And for my part,
I'm not
It'll
seeing
be
how you're
closer.
making that jump.
Well, but that 248 more
Well, but
gets
it's
you
still-
up
Yes, but
to.
it doesn't get you to 2 million, and I'm
It
just.
gets you up to 1.8.
Gets you closer.
I'm happy with 1.679, which is almost 1.680. In fact, it is, if you round off.
We can all be happy, but what's more important is whether
Flexibility.
flexibility and whether the county is happy.
Yeah, and
whether
The county-
they're going to accept
The
this.
county was happy at
3.1 deficit.
3.1.
so from my perspective, it's less an issue at this point of the actual number and back to the portion of flexibility. Because if we get into a situation where, for whatever reason, we find ourselves terribly overstaffed, I'm exaggerating to make the point, and we have no flexibility, it's not going to be just the cuts that we're looking at. We're going to be saddled with expenses that we really can't support going forward.
But you're not talking about reducing something because of declining enrollment. You're not talking about flexibility in case you have less students than you anticipated.
what I think we're looking at what are non-mandatory programs, and that is a non-mandatory program. It doesn't mean it's our preference by any means, but I also think that that the 1 year where the district maybe didn't do as much flexibility as we should have, we had the August layoff window, for those of you that remember that, and we don't have that option this time. We will not have an August layoff window. And these are preliminary notices, not final. No, only school psychologists are, by ed code. Doesn't mean they're not valuable, but by ed code they're
Yeah.
not.
And I'm talking flexibility here. I'm not recommending that we decimate the ranks. But
I just have a concern if you say, okay, the board has just voted to eliminate, where'd it go? 1 FTE of school counselors and 1.5 FTEs of counselors.
No. It's 1 or 1.5
Okay,
or
so
2.
whichever one we choose, say we say 1 or 1.5, and then down here with guidance text, it's 0.80 for a savings of $145,000, that's what we will do. That's my problem with this flexibility thing, is that we just, as a board, 5 of us voted to eliminate 1 full-time counselor and 1.80 full-time, or 0.80 guidance tech. And that's what we will do. That's what will happen. There's nothing in here that says, well, flexibility, we won't do that if X, 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 X.
So
they're gone.
So did you hear Hank's point about flexibility, that if we don't give them the flexibility of the possibility of this happening, it makes it more likely that we will end up having to do the other one you didn't like, which was maximizing class sizes.
And I would say, Wendy, yes, this does indicate the board is saying, all things considered, these are the things we have chosen to eliminate. The March process is your initial notice, and it's not until May that the final notice is given. So it's a kind of weird.
You still give the May notices, that's what
Yeah, you still give the May notices, correct. The only thing that went away was the August window for this year. So we have the 2, the initial and then the final, and the final is prior to May 15th.
And if I had, I don't want to use the word more faith, but if I understood the numbers better and I didn't see a running structural deficit that's been approved time and time again, and I mentally could say, I absolutely agree that 2 million is what we need to cut, but I don't. I'm looking at this as all I can see with these numbers, and granted, I'm just one of 5, well, part of this whole package. I don't see that number that you're trying to get to. I see 1.5. So I'm at 1.6 and I'm done. And it isn't about whether or not it's this, or this. It's I don't agree with the number.
Okay, so if we don't have a third vote, we may as well wrap this up then.
Okay. Did we skip any others? I can't remember.
Nope. Except items 21, 22, which we need to do in closed session.
Correct, okay. So then do we need a regular motion to accept all the things that you guys just said or not? I'm kind of
You're asking me.
I would think that we would need to have a motion saying that.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to
Because it is
accept
an agenda item.
the budget cuts as we have presented tonight?
I'll give that motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
None opposed?
I'm opposed.
Susan and Fran.
Motion carries.
Okay.
But I do recall that I asked if along the way we find out that we can change some of these, reinstate some of these, change some of these, that I was told, yes, we could.
And I would say, yes, we can reinstate. I think the point
But
that.
I understand about the layoff.
But if you don't give yourself that flexibility, there's nothing to reinstate.
That's right.
But anyone holding hopes out for that are likely to be disappointed.
Yep.
If anything, we're going to have to come up with more later.
John, unless we used to be, we used to be
Well,
saying we're going
and-
to get more, it's going to be better.
I know I've been rocking the boat here all night, and I don't believe that we should operate with this kind of structural deficit either. I just don't know that we have to fix it all right now, this second, before a second interim report goes out. And I agree with Leanne too, that giving the perception that we've done all the cuts we're going to do, that's dangerous because everybody can take a big breath and go, oh, well, good, that's over with. And it wasn't over with 2 years ago. It wasn't over with 3 years ago. I don't know if it's ever going to be over with, but, at the risk of making it seem like we're done, I don't think we are. That didn't help any, did it?
No.
Okay.
So
Any
are
further-
we having a closed session for those other things, or we're doing that at another meeting?
It's not on our agenda,
Okay.
so it has to
Okay.
be at the beginning of the next meeting.
Okay.
Which is March 7th.
Well, if we did both of those, that would be $79,000 right there.
So we're probably talking about a 6 p.m.
Yes.
post session at that. Okay? Meeting is adjourned.
Enjoy your guys' circle jerk.
So were you told you couldn't let your children play?
Yeah, gave me a ticket to boot. I don't know what. I've